Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is a debate on motion 16299 in the name of Shona Robertson on Budget Scotland No. 4 bill at stage 1. I invite members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons, and I call on the Cabinet Secretary to speak to and move the motion. Up to 14 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to lead today's Stage 1 debate for the 2025-26 Scottish Budget Bill. Since I introduced this budget to Parliament in December, the Government has engaged widely across this Parliament to build consensus for a spending programme that will deliver for all of Scotland. Parliament can see that the offer to Scotland has been enhanced by the separate agreements reached with the Scottish Liberal Democrats and the Scottish Greens, and the further action and investment that we'll take in neonates affected by drugs, free school meals, nature restoration, along with the introduction of a bus fare cap pilot and targeted support for hospices and colleges. This collaborative approach between parties demonstrates how the Scottish Parliament was designed to work, effectively engaging and negotiating to agree solutions for the benefit of Scotland. So we'll now move ahead with delivery, providing improvements to services in Scotland, which is what the people of Scotland want. As a government, we are proud that the 25-26 Scottish Budget delivers around £64 billion of funding.
Cabinet Secretary, if I may just stop you a moment, there seems to be a problem. If you'd like to continue, it appears your microphone has returned.
As a government, we are proud that the 25-26 Scottish Budget delivers around £64 billion of funding to deliver on our programme for government, and that it supports our top priorities to eradicate child poverty, grow the economy, tackle the climate emergency and provide high-quality, sustainable public services. I saw a key example of how society will benefit from this budget just yesterday when I visited the excellent National Treatment Centre in Kirkcaldy. I was able to see how it's providing thousands of additional appointments and diagnostic tests, and I'd like to thank those working at the centre who took time out to talk to me. As a Parliament, it's important to recognise that this budget is set against continued and unprecedented challenges to public finances. The block grant position for 25-26 represents only a 1% increase in real terms for resource, following the very welcome reset of budgets in 24-25 that started to address the austerity of the last 14 years. So while the UK autumn budget was a step in the right direction, this government is clear that the extent of the challenges we face in our public services will not be addressed in a single year. This further underlines the need for clarity from the UK Government on its longer-term investment plans and commitments, and I'll be pressing for this clarity in my ongoing engagement with HMT and in the work towards the UK spending review over the coming months. The great unknown, of course, is the net impact of the UK Government's hike in employer national insurance costs. We estimate this could add over £530 million in costs for directly employed public sector staff. If we include the costs of wider staff delivering public services such as GPs, dentists, social care staff, then this increases to over £700 million. It's essential that the UK Treasury fully fund the actual costs for Scotland's public sector. However, they've indicated that we will instead receive a much lower value Barnett share of spending in England. That is unacceptable, and Scottish ministers are pressing the UK Government to fund these additional public sector costs in full. Scotland and our public services should not be punished because we've chosen to invest more in public services and the pay of those delivering our public services. So we need an urgent decision on this to give public sector employers, including the NHS, police and local authorities, clarity to inform their spending decisions. I do, however, want to try and provide as much clarity today as I can, particularly for local government. I recognise that councils are in the process of finalising their budgets, and although we don't yet have figures from the Treasury, I want to support local government in managing their planning assumptions. I can therefore confirm that as things stand, I am aiming to provide funding that covers 60% of the reported costs for all portfolios. This means that for local government, I will commit to providing them with an additional £144 million to support the cost of these hikes inflicted on the public sector by the UK Government. By providing councils with the equivalent of a 5% national increase in council tax, the certainty I offer today should reduce the pressure on council tax decisions locally and help councils avoid inflation-busting increases. I will follow up with further detail on this issue once I receive further clarity with the Treasury, which I continue to press for. Looking ahead, our tax policy... Yes, of course.
Willie Rennie.
This was an important issue as part of our discussions through the budget negotiations. But can she say if the UK Government are more generous, that she would be prepared to increase the amount that's available for local government?
I can certainly give that commitment to Willie Rennie, but what I want to in the meantime is to give some certainty around planning assumptions. But of course, the more money we get from the UK Treasury for employers' national insurance contributions, the more I would distribute on a fair basis. Looking ahead, our tax policy decisions in this budget continue to deliver our progressive approach in Scotland while raising substantial revenues to support the delivery of our public services, asking those with the broadest shoulders to contribute more. In line with our tax strategy, for the remainder of this Parliament, we will provide certainty for our largest source of tax revenue and will not introduce any new bans or increase the rates of Scottish income tax. We will also maintain our commitment that more than half of taxpayers will pay less income tax in Scotland than the rest of the UK in 2025-26 and until the end of this Parliament. The Scottish Fiscal Commission estimates that our choices on income tax since devolution will raise up to an additional £1.7 billion in 2025-26 compared to if we had matched policy in the rest of the UK. And thanks to the tax and social security decisions that we have taken, 60% of Scots will be better off because they live in Scotland. That is exactly what this budget is about, delivering for and improving the lives of the people of Scotland. I want to now remind Parliament of what the 2025-26 Scottish Budget is delivering for Scotland. We believe that tackling poverty is an investment in the future of this country, and that's why eradicating child poverty is this Government's #1 priority. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation's UK Poverty 2025 report is clear that only in Scotland are child poverty rates set to fall by 2029. This is a great achievement and is thanks in part to measures like our Scottish Child Payment, bucking the trend across the UK. But we're in no doubt that there's still much more to do. And that's why, through this budget, we're developing the systems necessary to effectively scrap the impact of the two-child cap in 2026. We're also supporting wider households through investing £768 million for the Affordable Housing Supply Programme, boosting affordable housing supply across Scotland and enabling housing providers to deliver at least 8,000 homes for social rent, mid-market rent and low-cost home ownership. And to help with home energy costs, the budget is reinstating the universal winter heating payment to every pensioner household. On wider support for children, this budget will continue to invest around £1 billion through the local government settlement and continue to deliver high-quality funded early learning and childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds, supporting families to provide their children with an essential early learning experience at this critical stage in life. And to support our school children, this budget will provide up to £3 million to deliver a Bright Start breakfast pilot, to test the delivery of free breakfast clubs and kick-start more breakfast delivery across Scotland. We'll also provide £37 million to support local government to deliver on our commitment to expand free school meals provision for primary 6 and 7 children in receipt of Scottish Child Payment, expected to support around 25,000 pupils. And will provide an estimated £3 million to support a new test of change phase, which will extend free school meal eligibility in S1 to S3 in 8 local authority areas for pupils in receipt of Scottish Child Payment. We want to see a Scotland where everyone is able to flourish, to support Scotland in reaching its full potential, and that is why we're taking these important steps through this budget. Boosting fair green economic growth is also essential. It improves living standards and outcomes for the people of Scotland and helps increase tax revenues to support high-quality public services. This budget prioritises major capital investment in the foundations of our economy, such as housing, transport, digital connectivity and delivering critical infrastructure for a green and growing economy. We're investing over £7 billion in our total infrastructure package, including almost tripling our investment in offshore wind to £150 million, advancing our commitment of up to £500 million over 5 years, expanding regeneration funding to £62 million to invest in communities across Scotland, and investing £100 million for the continued rollout of our digital connectivity programmes across Scotland. This budget also ensures that enterprise and innovation are at the heart of our economic strategy, and through investing in an expanded enterprise package will grow our start-up economy and contribute towards our ambition of establishing Scotland as a top-performing start-up economy. Specifically, we are investing £321 million in Scotland's enterprise agencies to deliver our programme of support to help Scottish businesses to start, to be more productive and to attract investment. The Government is also supporting further investment in the Scottish National Investment Bank, with a net £200 million being offered to create jobs, support innovation and attract investment. And this Government is supporting the development of its future workforce by continuing to invest over £2 billion in Scotland's colleges, universities and skills development programmes. The budget supports businesses and communities through non-domestic rates by freezing the basic property rate, the lowest such rate in the UK, and maintaining the small business bonus scheme, the most generous of its kind in the UK. The budget also provides 40% rates relief in 25-26 for 92% of hospitality premises that are liable for the basic property rate. For our islands and remote areas, hospitality relief will continue at 100%. Both are capped at £110,000 per business. Briefly.
Creek Hoy.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Can she explain what is different between a pub with a rateable value of £50,000 that is facing extreme financial pressures and a pub with a rateable value of £60,000 or £75,000? Isn't this an entirely arbitrary distinction?
Cabinet Secretary.
This will impact 92% of hospitality premises. That is the vast majority. So the local pub, the local restaurant, that is the priority that this SNP government is focusing upon. More widely, as part of this government's commitment to net zero and tackling the climate change emergency, this budget will commit £4.9 billion of investment with a positive benefit for climate. This will support our commitment to scale up renewable energy, restore Scotland's natural environment, expand our public transport and active travel networks, and support a step change in how we heat our homes by investing over £300 million in energy efficiency and clean heat measures. Our public services are an integral part of our daily lives, and we remain committed to protecting these valued services through this budget. Building on many years of investments by the Scottish Government, I'm proud that the 25-26 budget takes significant steps in continuing this Government's investment in our frontline staff and public services, including record investment of £21.7 billion for health and social care and over £15 billion for local government. Presiding Officer, at the start of this year, the First Minister said there is nothing wrong in Scotland that can't be fixed by what is right in Scotland. This budget is all about putting the resources in place to do just that. So let me end with a reminder to Parliament of the important measures this Government is putting in place for the people of Scotland. Record NHS investment, including money to reduce waiting lists and make it easier for people to see their GP. Tax choices that put money in the pockets of low-income and middle-income earners and that help hard-pressed local pubs and restaurants. Winter heating payments for older Scots. More affordable homes. Investment in childcare and nursery education through more jobs and business growth. More breakfast clubs in our schools. £4.9 billion for positive climate action a record increase in funding for local services, transformational increases in culture spending and action to mitigate the two-child cap, which will lift 15,000 children out of poverty. I'm proud of this budget and all it delivers for the people of Scotland. I urge Parliament to support it. I move that the Parliament agrees to the general principles of the Budget Scotland No. 4 Bill.
Thank you. I now call on Kenneth Gibson to speak on behalf of the Finance and Public Administration Committee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to speak on behalf of the Finance and Public Administration Committee, which published a detailed report on the Scottish Budget 25-26 on 29th of January. I'll begin with committee reflections on the approach taken to timetabling the Scottish Budget. The UK Budget on 30th of October provided a welcome opportunity for the Scottish Government to publish its budget document earlier than in recent years, on 4th of December. This prompted discussions with the Scottish Government on the overall timetable for publication and scrutiny. Given the UK Government's welcome commitment to hold one fiscal event each autumn, the committee asks that a similar engagement approach is taken in future years, not least to aid the work of the Scottish Fiscal Commission. This will enable the development of robust budgetary proposals, accurate forecasts and, importantly, ensure effective parliamentary scrutiny. The committee remains concerned about the Scottish Government's lack of crucial medium and longer-term financial planning and repeated delays in publishing key strategic financial documents. The certainty of regular UK spending reviews and one fiscal event each year brings an opportunity for the Scottish Government to demonstrate its commitment to a more strategic approach to financial planning. We welcome the Cabinet Secretary's comment during the committee's pre-budget debate last week that she has instructed officials to begin planning for a Scottish spending review that will identify opportunities to optimise the use of Scottish Government funding over the longer term. The committee looks forward to engaging with her on these plans in early course. As part of that engagement, we ask the Government to clarify when it will publish a framework document that precedes a spending review to allow committees, public bodies, external organisations, think tanks and the public to input their views and influence those plans. We also repeat our calls for the Government to consider taking a zero-based budgeting approach to its spending review, learning lessons from countries like Estonia. It's reassuring that the Scottish Government is working to a May 2025 publication date for its medium-term financial strategy. The absence of this, due to the general election, hindered last year's pre-budget scrutiny. We've asked the Scottish Government, as part of its 2025 NTFS, to set out detailed scenario planning for capital and resource borrowing, including details of how the Government will approach any negative reconciliations that exceed annual borrowing limits. We know that the Scottish Government will provide an update on the fiscal sustainability of social security spending, and the committee asks that this includes details of how the Scottish Government is assessing the effectiveness and outcomes of its approach to the delivery of benefits and the impact on other parts of the budget. As we explored rising social security spending in some detail last week, I'll move on to the Scottish Government's approach to taxation. The committee welcomes the production of a tax strategy as providing clarity on its overall approach. The Scottish Government's focus on building an evidence base, including on behavioural responses, to inform future tax policy is also very welcome, particularly as the committee has repeatedly called for more detailed research on behavioural responses to tax policy. However, the tax strategy should, in our view, include details of plans for council tax reform, given this is long overdue. The Cabinet Secretary commented that she will work with COSLA to try to build consensus across the political spectrum on some guiding principles for reform before the end of this parliamentary session, and we look forward to that. The issue was explored during the evidence, and I'm sure other committee members will touch on it again during this debate. The tax strategy references further discussions with the UK Government not on VAT devolution, but VAT assignment. Our clear view is that VAT assignment would be of no benefit to the Scottish budget, be expensive to administer and potentially confusing to those expected to pay it. We trust assignment will now be put to bed once and for all. Some witnesses stated that tax is a significant factor in terms of whether or not they come to Scotland or retain a business in Scotland, arguing that the tax landscape must be more competitive in making Scotland an attractive place to do business, work and live. We therefore welcome the Scottish Government's decision to make no further changes to income tax in this parliamentary session. The committee agrees with the Cabinet Secretary that there is merit in carrying out a wider review of how the fiscal framework is operating. This should include how block grant adjustments based on relative growth with the rest of the UK impact on Scottish income tax revenue. The SFC's view is that we are unlikely to see significant behavioural effects of income tax policy this year compared with previous years due to the freezing of bands. It suggests that those in the top tax rate are more likely to be affected because they will probably have the most discretion to change their behaviour, to move around and so on. We've spoken much in this chamber about the potential impact of the UK Government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions, particularly on the public sector. Last Thursday, the Cabinet Secretary said, as committees will be aware, the Government has called on the UK Treasury to fully fund those additional costs. On 24th of January, the Treasury advised that Scotland will receive only a balanced share of the available funding, which is deeply concerning because it will create a shortfall of £300 million. Prior to this announcement, we recommended that the Scottish Government sets out how it will meet the expected shortfall in UK funding for increased employer national insurance contributions. This includes the impact on the Scottish budget, with the Scottish Government to provide any additional funding required, or in public bodies if they had to absorb some of these costs. We look forward to hearing more from the Cabinet Secretary about this key issue, and I'm pleased that she touched on it in her opening speech. In future, given the potential impact on the Scottish budget, we've asked the UK Government to have early discussions with the Scottish Government to resolve funding uncertainties arising from such significant UK policy announcements. I'm keen to highlight evidence we heard on growing the economy. Both Scottish Financial Enterprise and Colleges Scotland seek greater flexibility to respond to the needs of the economy and business. The SFC said, as an industry, we need short, sharp interventions, say 6 months for retraining people. According to Renewable Scotland, vocational pathways are absolutely key, and we have seen in some of those productive economies in the world, work-based learning works. In addition, Technology Scotland reminded us that, while investment in skills is challenging, the talent pool is as attractive in Scotland as it is anywhere else. When we put these points to the Cabinet Secretary, she recognised that more action is needed on skills to address gaps and match them to the requirements of the economy. We look forward to receiving the follow-up information she offered to provide and the ongoing work to join up the activities of Skills Development Scotland and colleges to ensure the skills needs of employers and the economy are met in this rapidly changing world. The committee seeks further detail on how the Scottish Government is working to maximise the opportunities for our universities and high-performing sectors in Scotland to enable them to be even more globally competitive. The committee also awaits a detailed written response setting out the Scottish Government's vision of how a sustainable higher education sector, essential to economic growth, can be achieved, given the evidence we heard about ongoing financial challenges. The creation of a Cabinet subcommittee on investment in the economy, chaired by the Deputy First Minister too, help create a business environment that drives investment and growth, including progressing key opportunities identified in the Green Industrial Strategy, is welcome. We look forward to receiving regular updates in relation to progress of and outcomes from the Cabinet Subcommittee's new strands of work. Regarding the Scottish Government's Public Service Reform Programme, we heard from public bodies including Food Standards Scotland, Register Scotland, South of Scotland Enterprise, Transport Scotland, the Scottish Funding Council and NHS National Services Scotland about the reform and innovation their organisations are progressing. We welcome their efforts to work collaboratively to achieve efficiencies and improvements to public service delivery. Nevertheless, we share the Auditor-General for Scotland's view that the Scottish Government must demonstrate stronger leadership and bring an overall vision to public service reform if more progress is to be made, including in relation to potentially changing public service delivery models. The Scottish Government's approach to reform has changed many times over recent years, and as the Auditor-General said, it's difficult to scrutinise a moving target. It's therefore hoped that the Government's new public service reform strategy will bring more vision and stability and enable progress and outcomes to be properly measured and scrutinised for their effectiveness. The committee also believes there will be merit in the Government leading an annual debate on public service reform. After all, the Government itself has cited reform as a significant priority in achieving fiscal sustainability, and it touches on the remits of almost all committees and the lives of every individual in Scotland. We trust this proposal will be supported across the Chamber. Lastly, Presiding Officer, I wish to touch on the scrutiny of the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body. As members will know, the SPCB has a prior call on the Scottish Consolidated Fund, meaning that its budget is allocated before the Scottish Government makes any other commitments. The SPCB budget provides for the operating costs of the Parliament, along with the costs of the Ombudsman and Commissioners, termed office holders, defined as SPCB-supported bodies. The SPCB's 25-26 budget will be £136.2 million, a net £9.7 million, 7.6% increase on this year's. Changes to employers' national insurance contributions account for £1.9 million of this increase. Around 3% of the increase was due to MSP salary rises, the only part of the SPC budget reported in the media, of course. The SPCB restated ongoing concerns regarding the growing share of its budget being spent on office holders, amounting to 15.7% in 2025-26, including an unforeseen increase for the Electoral Commission of £2.1 million, partly offset by the delayed Patient Safety Commissioner. The Committee's recent inquiry into Scotland's Commissioner landscape, a strategic approach, found the current Commissioner's situation no longer fit for purpose and called for a moratorium on creating any new SPCB-supported bodies or expanding the remit of existing bodies until a root and branch review of the structure is carried out. So the Committee is delighted that the SPCB-supported bodies Landscape Review Committee has now been established to carry out this review. We seek an update from the SPCB in relation to shared services and how it will enhance the transparency of officeholder government arrangements. In light of wide-scale public service reform and continuing pressure on Scotland's public finances, we recommend that future bids also include information on the specific actions the SPCB is taking to deliver reforms within the Parliament, such as digitalisation, collaboration and sharing of corporate functions and premises. An assessment of the impact of these actions should also be provided. Presiding Officer, it only remains for me to thank the hard work of my committee colleagues, our first-class clerking team and the evidence of our witnesses in delivering our report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's budget debate sets out a core dividing line in Scottish politics, a dividing line between my party and the failed cosy socialist consensus, a consensus that's wedded to high tax and low growth, and which stands in stark contrast to our common-sense budget plans. Tonight it will be the Scottish Conservatives and the Scottish Conservatives alone who will vote against this bad budget. But contrary to Shona Robertson's narrative, we did engage constructively, setting out a new direction for Scotland. We would cut tax for workers, businesses and home buyers. We would grow the economy and tackle the SNP's soaring benefits bill.
Let's hear Mr Hoy.
And we would deliver. We would do something that Mr Swinney has not done, and we would deliver public service reform to drive real savings at the same time. But today is a day of betrayal for Scottish workers and Scottish taxpayers. For 18 years, the SNP government has let down hard-working Scots. It has failed to deliver for businesses, including many retail and hospitality operators, who are yet again to be robbed of rates relief support available elsewhere in the UK. Now, the SNP focuses on inputs but not outcomes, more tax, more spending, but it pitifully ignores the performance of our public services. Our schools, our hospitals, our roads and our railways are all deteriorating. Crime is up, police numbers are down, and many Scottish businesses are teetering on the edge as a result of decisions taken by both Keir Starmer and John Swinney. But rather than taking a stand against this budget, opposition parties will today endorse the SNP's failed legacy by backing it. In recent days, rather than standing up for his constituents, Alex Cole-Hamilton has ridden to the rescue of John Swinney. But he's been, I will in a moment, but he's been getting carried away. Now, I don't disagree that he has secured some concessions in his budget negotiations. But Mr Cole-Hamilton says the Liberal Democrats, in fact, he boasted that the Liberal Democrats secured the reinstatement of the winter fuel payment and that he alone delivered rates relief for hospitality businesses. But what the Lib Dems don't want you to know is that they have gone back on their word. Because in December, Mr Cole-Hamilton said he would vote down a budget if it contained a single penny being spent on independence. But last week it was confirmed that spending in the Constitution is woven right throughout this budget. Well, I will give way if Mr Cole-Hamilton can answer this question. Is he being disingenuous or was he duped?
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Well, Presiding Officer, I'm very grateful to Craig Hoy for giving way. I had been under the impression that pantomime season was over. How wrong I was. Oh, no, it isn't. But, Presiding Officer, clearly Mr Hoy has not read the letters pages of many august Scottish publications this weekend, where wilder outriders of the nationalist cause are bemoaning the fact that Liberal Democrats have secured the deletion of any spending on independence in this year's budget. So he'll find that we've kept our word.
Craig Hoy.
I think that you'll find in the deepest, darkest of recesses of the Scottish Government buildings there are many civil servants beavering away to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom. Now, we expected, I think, this from the Liberal Democrats. What we didn't expect is the position of Scottish Labour, because Anas Sarwar will spinelessly let this budget pass without securing a single concession from the SNP. It took just one mildly hysterical speech from John Swinney for Scottish Labour to blink first. But Labour's decision to cave in handed the SNP the cheapest budget deal in the history of devolution. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, let me explain why the Scottish Conservatives oppose this budget. Because I will now take an intervention.
I would just like to know what Craig Hoy is delivering for his constituents today, apart from doom, gloom and financial illiteracy.
Craig Hoy.
I think if the Deputy First Minister had read our submission, she would have seen that we were going to cut tax for ordinary, hard-working Scots. We are delivering something that's not coming from the Liberal Democrats or the Labour Party, which is strong opposition to this useless SNP government. I will not give way. I will not give way to Mr. Swinney. I will not give way to Mr. Swinney. I don't have time. If I could get the could I get the time back?
A little bit of time, if you wish. If the member wishes to give way to the First Minister, then a little bit of time.
We've got a little bit of time. I will give way to Mr. Swinney.
Well, I'm very grateful to Mr. Hoy for giving way. What will he say to his constituents, his elderly constituents, when he explains that he's going to vote today against the restoration of a winter fuel payment? What will he say to his constituents about that betrayal?
Craig Hoy.
I will be very clear. It was the SNP and Labour that took it away from them and is only now partially restoring it. No. These aren't just my warnings, Mr. Swinney. These aren't just my warnings, Mr. Swinney, because this budget ignores deep-seated problems in the structure and sustainability of Scotland's public finances. Audit Scotland has expressed misgivings about the failure to deliver radical modernisation that our public services urgently need. The Scottish Fiscal Commission has sounded alarm bells about the affordability, sustainability and desirability of the SNP's social security policies. Scottish Financial Enterprise has raised concerns about the consequences of the SNP's tax policies, most notably behavioural change. Deputy Presiding Officer, in Scotland, we could opt to have a modern and dynamic competitive economy, and we should not have to justify the case for lower tax. It should be for the SNP government to explain why it has made Scotland the highest tax part of the United Kingdom. And there is an economic and moral case for low taxation. It's just that the SNP cannot see it. Because all things being equal, lower taxes should deliver increased growth and higher living standards, but sadly, both are absent in the SNP's big state Scotland. Now, under the SNP, the Scottish tax base has grown at a slower rate than the rest of the UK. Scottish salaries have failed to keep pace with those south of the borders. Devolved income tax decisions mean that Scottish taxpayers are paying £1.7 billion more than they would if we had the same rates and thresholds as the rest of the UK. But the net funding for the Scottish budget is only £838 million. The Scottish Fiscal Commission calls this an economic performance gap. I call it a lost decade and more of dogma under the SNP's misplaced priorities. Now, in her budget speech, Shona Robertson looked for a moment that she might have learned from the mistakes of the past. She said she wanted to say a thank you to those with the broadest shoulders who are paying a little bit more. In reality, what did Shona Robertson's thank you mean for Scots earning £30,000? A tax cut of just £1.21 per month. And this budget confirmed that the threshold for basic and intermediate budgets will rise by 3.5% in April. But as the convener said, the top three bands remain frozen. This means that the number of higher-rate taxpayers is expected to jump from over 490,000 to now 550,000 in Scotland. In contrast, we proposed a package of bold, forward-looking, growth-generating tax cuts to make Scotland more competitive for those on middle incomes and the rest of the UK. And we would offer targeted tax cuts to businesses, including to Scotland's struggling pubs and hospitality sectors. Now, ministers will, of course, assert Mr Swinney's chuntering away, but ministers will of course assert that the higher taxes are used to deliver its social contract to the Scottish people. So let's look at the reality of that social contract. Winter fuel payments stripped from most pensioners last winter. The number of Scots in pain and relying on private health care is at a record high, and the number of economically inactive young Scots, too many who are now parked on benefits, hit 210,000 last year. Despite all the rhetoric, that is the reality of the SNP's social contract with Scotland. And this year, even with Labour's national insurance tax on jobs, this budget settlement delivers a real terms increase in revenue spending and an uplift in the capital budget. But as the Institute for Fiscal Studies has warned, more money alone will not fix our public services. And they are not alone in saying that. Dr Ian Kennedy, chairman of BMA Scotland, said new funding will, and I quote, never be the answer alone to solving the NHS crisis. And Audit Scotland warns that the Scottish Government's plans for the future of the public sector workforce are too vague, with the Auditor General Stephen Boyle questioning the Government's commitment to, quotes, right-size the workforce. This year, the cost of the public sector workforce will absorb 54% of the Government's revenue budget. Yet last week, we discovered that the number of senior civil servants has risen by nearly 500 in just 2 years. Now, when the Minister sums up, perhaps he will say something to public sector bodies who are saying that they need to address the size of their workforce, and therefore they are calling for flexibility around the policy of no compulsory redundancies, and ministers must look seriously at this. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, the greatest risk to Scotland's public finances lies in the SNP's welfare policies, a risk which grows as a result of the SNP's 11th-hour decision to mitigate the two-child benefit cap. The Scottish Fiscal Commission forecasts that social security spending will increase from £6.3 billion in 2024 to 2025 to a staggering £8.8 billion by the end of the decade. Again, when the Minister speaks, perhaps he can say how this is going to be paid for, because on current trends, the Scottish budget will crumple under the weight of the welfare bill, and this is a political choice that has been taken by ministers. Presiding Officer, this is the wrong budget for Scotland. It fails to tackle waste or deliver reform. It fails to reverse damaging trends on welfare, and it fails to deliver growth. But it will pass with the support of Greens, Alba and the Liberal Democrats, and because of the abject weakness of Scottish Labour. But it will not pass with our support. And I agree with Shona Robertson at the weekend. A dividing line has been drawn, and we know exactly where we stand in relation to our political opponents. We stand on the side of taxpayers, businesses and public services, and that is why we will vote against this rotten budget tonight.
Thank you, Mr Hoy. I now call on Michael Mara to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scottish Labour will not stand in the way of this budget because we desperately want to see Labour's record investment improve delivery on the front line. But we will not vote for this budget because we very much doubt that it will. And years of evidence tell us that that is the case, a complete lack of delivery, Presiding Officer. So this budget, as it stands, promises more of the same, and that's nowhere near good enough for the 1 in 6 Scots stuck on NHS waiting lists, the patients waiting days in A&E, the elderly Scots stuck on trolleys and corridors, not shocked but resigned to what is the new SNP normality. The need for a change of direction was Labour's principal ask in all of our cordial and constructive discussions with the Cabinet Secretary and the Finance Minister. But there is no evidence of that change, Presiding Officer. There is not even the recognition that change is required. Take the First Minister's NHS speech just last week. A re-announcement of the old plans that had not worked, the old schemes that had not been followed through. No new ideas, no new direction, no resolve to unite Parliament and the country behind a programme of national renewal. Scottish Labour's contribution to this budget, certainly.
First Minister.
I'm very grateful to Mr Mara for giving way, and I want to put him right on the point that he's just made. I am very happy, as this budget demonstrates, to lead a process of bringing people together in this Parliament to agreed conclusions. We've done that. My Finance Secretary has done that superbly well in bringing together the Greens and the Liberal Democrats and our colleague in Alapa, and the invitation is there for the Labour Party to be part of that big consensus to do the right thing for Scotland. It applies on the health service as well. Very happy to have those discussions, but Labour's got to vote for the budget to make it happen.
Michael Mara.
Unfortunately, Unfortunately, Presiding Officer, there is absolutely no evidence that the First Minister can build a consensus around the need for a change of direction in this country. He has been singularly unable to answer that question, because Scottish Labour's contribution to this budget is a record £5.2 billion. £5.2 billion, and it's delivering for Scotland that is only possible because the people of Scotland kicked out the Tories and sent Scottish Labour MPs into the heart of a UK Labour government. The largest Scottish budget in the history of devolution. So let's be clear. The only reason the measures set out today are possible is because Labour moved decisively to end austerity, to rebuild the public finances and to invest in public services. All of this was voted against by the SNP. And they have opposed every measure, Presiding Officer, to raise the money that they are spending today. And the SNP fantasy finances of demanding £70 billion in further spending, but opposing every measure to pay for it, would make Liz Truss blush. No thank you, sir. But to be fair, John Swinney did have one suggestion. It was for the Chancellor to raise income tax in England to match income tax rates in Scotland. Surely the man who negotiated the fiscal framework would know that doing that would actually reduce the amount of money coming to Scotland. Well, the First Minister might want to listen to the Fraser of Allender Institute, because the Fraser of Allender Institute, Presiding Officer, have said that his fatal misunderstanding of public money would actually cut Scotland's budget by £636 million. Old quote 2 weeks ago, Presiding Officer, 2 weeks ago. Labour increased the budget by over £5 billion, and John Swinney would want to have cut it by over £600 million. It's SNP fiscal incompetence of the highest order. And it's little wonder that so many struggle to believe that this record investment will result in better outcomes with John Swinney at the helm. The SNP has used this budget to fix some of the most egregious mistakes of 3 consecutive years of emergency budgets and panic cuts, slashing the housing budget and leaving council budgets in tatters. No thank you, Madam. These decisions had devastating consequences. A lost year in Scottish house building while homelessness hits record high levels. Tens of thousands of children wake up in temporary accommodation on Christmas Day. The uplift in local government funding this year will not put right the damage done by more than a decade of budget cuts, most of them authored by the First Minister, which treated councils as an afterthought and decimated their funding. Only the SNP could think that reversing some of the worst mistakes they made was a triumph, Presiding Officer. But this budget could have been so much more. A time of increased investment should be the moment for a serious government to seize the opportunity to reform services for the better. But the SNP have declined that opportunity. In the last 15 months alone, Audit Scotland have published 5 major reports calling on the Scottish Government to urgently prioritise and act on public service reform. The Auditor-General is now monthly banging his head against the SNP's brick wall. The Auditor-General, the Scottish Fiscal Commission, the Parliament's Finance Committee, all as one voice, yet nothing ever changes. No thank you, sir. Nowhere is the need for a new direction clearer to see than in Scotland's NHS. Hard-working staff pushed the breaking point. Again, the Auditor-General appealing to the Government last November, and I quote, "Fundamental change in how NHS services are provided is now urgently needed." The Institute for Fiscal Studies rightly pointing out that the SNP appears unable to, and I quote, "translate the money and the staff into what it needs to deliver the appointments and the treatments." Presiding Officer, today, data published today, shows that in 2024, almost 50,000 fewer planned operations took place compared to 2019. 50,000. And the height of the SNP's ambition is that by 2026, patients will not have to wait more than a year for treatment. And even that meagre ambition is a reheated promise that they failed to deliver previously. This budget will not bring change to our NHS. Certainly.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
I wonder if Michael Marrick has set out on the health service anything that the Labour Party asked for within these budget negotiations, because isn't it true they asked for precisely nothing and therefore got nothing back in return?
Michael Mara.
So what we asked, in certainly all the meetings, was to take a new approach to our NHS. What we asked for was to clear the backlogs, to reform the NHS so it was actually able to deliver. And I have to say that the First Minister has republished just last week his previous plans that he failed to deliver anything of. Because this is, Presiding Officer, a tired government that has lost its way and run out of ideas. And week after week...
Members, there's a bit too much noise. We need to hear from Mr Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Week after week, the First Minister says that things are not really that bad. But admissions of crisis are wheedled out of him in moments of weakness. Yet daily, he denies the reality experienced by so many people who have come into contact with our NHS, our schools and our justice system. Scots are paying ever more and getting less in return, where every institution is weaker after 18 years of John Swinney and the SNP. A government that will not admit when things are going wrong is never going to turn things around. Our country needs a new direction. We need a government that's invested in making things better, turning things around, doing the hard work of fixing what the SNP has broken. Presiding Officer, this is not as good as it gets. Our country desperately needs a new direction.
Thank you, Mr Mara. I now call on Ross Greer to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I should start by congratulating Michael Mara, who I do sincerely have a lot of respect for. That was a truly barnstorming defence of having had the opportunity to achieve something for the people of Scotland, but turned it down. It was a level of passion for fence-sitting that really was only the reserve previously of our Liberal colleagues, but is apparently now the preserve of the Labour Party, the Liberals having started to engage in this process. Last week, when we announced the agreements on the budget, I was asked by a journalist, surely given everything that happened to the Greens last year, we should have taken the opportunity to, and I quote them, give the SNP a bloody nose. Now, taking aside for a moment the kind of violent metaphor there, it was a question that I just couldn't quite understand, because that's a style of politics, a style of game playing that doesn't feed any children, doesn't create any jobs, doesn't protect our natural environment. It delivers nothing but headlines. And I get it from the perspective of the media. Conflict is interesting, it's easy to write about. Cooperation is often a bit boring. But I know what has a better outcome for people and planet. I know what the public expect us to do once we come here. And of course there are limits to compromise. Our parties do believe in different things. But by any standard measure, as Craig Hoy somewhat melodramatically put it, this Parliament has the largest majority of politicians from parties to the left of centre of any in Europe. There is a broad consensus around the need to build a more compassionate society. And that consensus is a powerful one, yes.
Monica Lennon.
I'm grateful to Ross Greer. I think what is welcome is the commitment in the budget to expand universal free school meals, particularly around secondary schools. Did the Green Party ask about the P67 rollout, and is there any commitment given about any action in the near future?
Ross Greer.
Grateful to Monica Lennon for that intervention. The primary 6-7 rollout will indeed continue in the near future. So that's actually exactly what I was just about to come on to, because the package that we agreed last week, a key commitment to it was that extension of free school meals to thousands of additional young people in S1 to S3. What that builds on is a previous budget agreement that the Greens secured that delivered universal free school meals for primary 4 and 5 pupils, and what is now the ongoing rollout to children in primary 6 and 7 who receive the Scottish Child Payment. And I should be clear, the Scottish Greens see all of these as steps towards universal free school meals from early years to the end of high school, because in a country as rich as ours, there is no need for any child to be sitting in school hungry. But that wasn't the only element of last week's package that we agreed. We also secured a year-long trial of a bus fare cap in one part of Scotland, a recommendation of the Fair Fares Review, but with respect to government colleagues, not one it appeared that they were intending on taking forward, but that will now happen. That reflects the fact that bus journeys make up something in the region of 3/4 of all public transport journeys in this country, but often receive far too little attention in this Parliament, especially when we know that transport is the one area of emissions still significantly going up in Scotland, and how shifting people onto public transport is key to that. Reducing the cost of taking the bus is essential if we want to do that. So this bus fare cap pilot will build on the success of free bus travel for young people under 22s, which I believe the Cabinet Secretary referred to a few weeks ago as being one of the reasons why the bus network in Scotland has been able to stave off collapse, the huge success of concessionary travel for young people. We also secured a record amount of funding for Scotland's Nature Restoration Fund and associated projects. That has been transformational, not just for our natural environment, one of the most depleted on the planet, but also for local communities where it has created jobs, especially across our rural communities. And I've seen the impact of that, for example, on Arran, where the RV Coast Explorer, a research vessel, particularly for use in Lash Bay's no-take zone, was part funded through the Nature Restoration Fund during my colleague Orna Slater's time as the Minister. But that final package was not all of what the Greens secured through this budget. Before that, we had set out our two key red lines. And the first was on climate spending. No step back from the record amount of climate spending that the Greens had delivered in our last year in government. And that could not be more urgent, given the planet has hit 1.5 degrees of global warming just last month. But it is also absolutely essential to Scotland's economic future. We saw in the most recent report on jobs and green energy that in a single year we've gone from 27,000 to 42,000 jobs. Craig Hoy talks about common sense. I can't think of a clearer example of common sense than investing in the sector of our economy that is quite literally protecting the future of life on this planet and creating thousands of high-quality, lasting jobs across this country. Our second red line was on the funding of local councils, essential local services like schools, social care, libraries and waste collection. We made it clear at the start of discussions to the Government that the Greens could not vote for a budget that continued the council tax freeze. That has been ended. No cap has been brought in. It is for councils to make up their own minds on this, as they have every right to do as local elected bodies. And we said that we would need to see a real terms increase to local council funding. That has also been delivered. Now, we do need to see substantial long-term reform to avoid this annual haggle over how much councils are funded by central government. We are a total outlier in European terms when it comes to the fact that the vast majority of municipal government funding is set by national government. Scotland needs to get into the European mainstream on this. I should be clear that these were not always easy negotiations. They were, in many ways, the most difficult negotiations for the Greens in a decade. We were not the only party that the government could rely on to get its budget over the line. We were no longer in government, so we didn't have that level of influence. But despite that, I can list a long list of achievements for people and planet as a result of the Greens' engagement in this budget, compared to a Labour Party that got everything it asked for out of this budget because it simply asked for nothing. I'm proud that as a result of the Scottish Greens' engagement, constructive engagement with the Government and the agreement that we've come to, that more children will be fed, the price of the bus will go down for many people across the country, our natural environment will be protected and jobs will be created. That was what we were elected here to do, not to grandstand and to grab headlines, but to deliver for people and planet.
Thank you, Mr Greer. And I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, this afternoon I speak from a position for my party which, whilst not wholly unprecedented, is largely uncommon in the tenure of this minority administration, and certainly in terms of our support for not just the general principles of this budget, but this budget at all stages as it transits through Parliament. And we do so, Presiding Officer, because in a Parliament of minorities, Scottish Liberal Democrats will always act responsibly and try to find common ground where it exists. It was in that spirit that we managed to reach agreement on the budget with the Government. And thanks to Liberal Democrats, that budget will now include a long overdue replacement for the Belford Hospital in Fort William, a replacement for the Edinburgh Eye Pavilion, help for babies born addicted to drugs, with further investment totalling £2.6 million. This one is personal for me, and I raised it with the First Minister just a couple of weeks ago, that when I was a youth worker, I worked with Aberlara, who will benefit in terms of the development of these new services, in their work in helping babies withdraw from drugs, 1,500 born such since 2017. That's one of the reasons I got into politics in the first place. We have done some real good there. We've also secured the right for family carers to earn more without having their support withdrawn. My colleague in Westminster, Sir Ed Davey, has led the way on that in the UK Parliament, and we have followed suit here. There is, of course, the reinstatement of the winter fuel payment for pensioners and a £200 million improvement package for social care, reducing NHS waiting lists and tackling issues like delayed discharges. More money for local healthcare to make it easier to see a GP near you or an NHS dentist. These are services which are under pressure like never before. We all see it in our casework mailbags day in, day out. And people shouldn't have to live in pain or wait weeks for treatment and vital appointments. There is an extra £5 million backing for hospices and funding for brand new specialist support across the country for long COVID, ME and chronic fatigue, care pathways that Liberal Democrats have been demanding and calling for since this Parliament first convened. And that's not all Liberal Democrats are delivering. We've secured £3.5 million so that colleges can deliver baskets of skills that our economy and our public services need, with new programmes focused on things like social care and offshore wind, to create a pipeline of the skilled workforce that we need for the jobs of the future. There's also funding to provide a brighter future for the young people with complex needs who attend Corsford College in Renfrewshire, and an extra £29 million for additional support needs to help pupils and their teachers. This is all on top of course, progress on business rates relief for the hospitality sector, funding to build more affordable homes, up 26%, thanks to an extra £172 million. We've got ring-fenced agricultural funding, more money for local council services, including enhanced support for local authorities operating key ferry services, lifeline links. And there is now a line of sight through the infrastructure investment plan to replace the Gilbert Bain Hospital in Lerwick, Kilmarron Special School in Cooper, and for a new railway station for Newborough in Fife. My party will keep fighting to propel these projects to the top of the to-do list, and nobody more so than Beatrice Wishart in her pursuit of that new hospital which Shetland so desperately needs. It doesn't just serve the Isles, of course, it does serve many of the industries operating in the North Sea as a first point of call in emergencies. Presiding Officer, from early on in this process, it was clear that an early election was always very unlikely, and whilst we have said many times that we think that the change that Scotland fundamentally needs is a change of government, we will not have that opportunity for some months to come. And indeed, Labour's announcement a month ago that they would abstain confirmed it once and for all. It's why my party have sought to shape the budget and get the best out of it for our constituents, because this is not a referendum on the performance of the SNP, which by any metric is failing the people of Scotland. We've been determined to use this budget to actually begin to unpick some of that damage. And that is why, and what the people who voted for us, who sent us here, expect us to do, to act like grown-ups, to put their interests first, to get things done. And Liberal Democrat priorities will now be backed by hundreds upon hundreds of millions of pounds of government investment. And as I've outlined already, there is a long list of policies and projects that we have won for our constituents, but for Scotland as a whole as well. And so we will be voting for the budget today. But, Presiding Officer, there be no doubt, we will continue to hold this government to account. We remain ardent critics of it and the decisions it has taken. The funds and the promises we have secured need to be backed now by delivery. We have handed ministers the resources. It's now for them to prosecute the case that we have laid out. And this is a government which has proven time and time again that it is sometimes incapable of that delivery. We will hold them to account. In our NHS, in social care, in lifeline ferries for island communities, my party are not afraid to collaborate when it's in the best interest of our country, and we will negotiate in good faith as we have done on this occasion. But we are also not afraid to tell the truth about a government which, after 18 years, is long past its sell-by date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cole-Hamilton. We will now move to the open debate. Speeches of around 6 minutes, and I call Michelle Thompson to be followed by Pam Gozo. Ms Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is indeed a budget made in Scotland for Scotland, and I add my voice to those who welcome the contribution of the Greens, the Liberal Democrats and ALPA. The Tories, as ever, are taking their job of opposition so seriously, they seem to oppose everything the Scottish Government does, everything this Parliament does, and pretty much everything Scotland does. But what of the bridesmaid party, also known as the Labour Party in Scotland, who never quite get that white dress? They aspire to government, yet are unable to accept that being in government brings responsibilities and choices. Stuck between their own lack of policy ideas and the missteps of Sir Keir Starmer, they've chosen to sit on their hands. It takes a special kind of political incompetence to announce that they'll abstain months in advance, having achieved absolutely nothing to advance their cause, nor the interests of the Scottish people. They claim the bill will not deliver the change that Scotland needs, and this is why they're standing with the Tories in not supporting this SNP budget. I give way.
Michael Mara.
I thank the member for giving way. Does she not think that £5.2 billion is a worthwhile contribution to the Scottish people?
Michelle Thompson.
I would make completely clear my ambition for Scotland is far more than that, not relying on handouts. How about we all grow up and create our own future in the form of independence, and that would sort that. So let us look at some of the changes in the budget. A compelling suite of policies across health and social care, support for our most vulnerable in society, including a winter heating payment, a £34 million uplift to the culture budget, which has been very well received by the sector, £25 million to properly focus on green jobs and to build a sustainable supply chain, as well as over £300 million of ScotWind revenues, thankfully protected for investment in jobs. All of this is enabled by investment. And we see a real growth agenda in the form of £768 million budget for affordable homes, enabling over 8,000 new properties for social rent to be built this year. Who wouldn't support that? Before the general election in December 2023, much attention was paid to independent research from the Nuffield Foundation and the Centre for Economic Performance at the London School of Economics. It concluded that the UK had lacked a coherent economic strategy for many years. Yet, since being elected, the UK Government has done its best to cement this lack into the UK's DNA. The report bemoaned the cuts to benefits under the post-2010 austerity drive of successive Tory governments over the previous 15 years, claiming all forms of cuts had reduced the incomes of the poorest fifth by just under £3,000 a year. But UK Labour, picking up the mantle of government, clearly thinks the Tories didn't go far enough. They're changing the work capability assessment, means testing winter fuel payments, accelerating the migration of claimants from employment and support allowance onto universal credit. Overall, they plan to reduce the welfare bill by a further £4.1 billion by 29 to 30, whereas the few benefit increases planned amount to a paltry rise of just £0.2 billion. But it is keeping two benefit rules that have a particularly dire effect on the living standards of the poorest, the benefit cap and the two-child cap. And it is these that this SNP government already mitigates their plans to, and it is these that the Labour Party in Scotland will not support. The huge amount that this SNP government pays to mitigate Tory and now Labour austerity is worth putting on the record, presiding officer. A quote from a letter from the Scottish Government to the Finance and Public Administration Committee. Subject to parliamentary approval in our 2025-26, our investment to mitigate the impacts of UK government policies will rise to over £210 million per year, an increase of over £56 million. Use of the term social contract is often quoted in this chamber, and I think it worth a reminder of what it means. It's much more than the choices of this SNP government to ensure our Scottish students do not pay university fees, or our chronically ill pay constantly for prescriptions, or our youth getting free bus travel and so on. A social contract is at the heart of democracy. If the public feels that they're not being heard, that the government doesn't respond with public services that take account of their needs, then government risks losing legitimacy. It fundamentally underpins trust in our democracy. The people of Scotland at the last UK general election placed their faith and trust in Labour. How misplaced they were. Buyers' regrets being felt across the board, not least by the newly elected local Labour MP to my area, who claimed my constituents should vote Labour to save the Grangemouth refinery. How did that work out for him? The people of Scotland can put their faith and their trust in this SNP government that they will endeavour to do the right thing for them, even in difficult circumstances, instead of using difficult circumstances as an excuse to do nothing. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Thompson. I now call Pam Gosell to be followed by Kevin Stewart. Ms Gosell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Every year, the budget is a chance for the SNP government to set a new direction for Scotland's finances, to put more money back into the pockets of hard-working people, to give businesses the support they desperately need to thrive, to grow our economy. Instead, after 18 years, the SNP government has produced yet another budget that is just more of the same: high tax, low growth. It's the same stifling agenda that has cost Scotland's economy £11 billion since 2011. That means that Scotland has £624 million less to spend on public services every single year than we would if we had grown at the same rate as the rest of the UK. But the SNP have never understood that you cannot tax your way to growth. It's common sense. Instead, under their so-called progressive income tax regime, Scotland remains the highest taxed part of the United Kingdom. Everyone's earnings more than £30,000 a year pay more income tax in Scotland than they would south of the border. That's teachers, nurses, police officers, all paying more. That is not progressive, it's unfair, and it's tanking our economy. In the words of Sandy Begbie from Scottish Financial Enterprise, higher income tax rates in Scotland have led to less rather than more money for public services, while also deterring investment and harming economic growth. Not only that, but the public services Scots are getting in return are getting worse every year. A recent poll found that 49% of Scots feel that they are not getting value for money for their bigger tax bills. And who can blame them? Under the SNP, everything from Scotland's roads to our schools to our hospitals is declining. And this budget sets out no serious plans to fix them, but just continues telling people they must contribute more and get less. Looking to business, the SNP budget is no better. Andrew McRae from the Federation of Small Businesses said that this budget will be a bitter pill to swallow for small retailers. Not only are businesses being harmed by the UK Labour government's national insurance rises, but the SNP have once again failed to pass on business rates relief to many businesses. Vital support, which let's not forget, has been funded by the UK Government since 2022 to 2023 and never fully passed on by the SNP. Recently, I met with representatives from the hospitality industry who said that the SNP's failure to extend full business rates relief to pubs and restaurants would be the death knell for many. One said that many restaurants have been forced to move from a 7-day to a 3-day working week because of soaring costs which have led to hiring freeze for many businesses, taking vital jobs out of the market. And while Labour MPs in Westminster have imposed punishing taxes on businesses, Labour's MSPs here in Holyrood are sitting back and allowing the SNP budget to pass without the slightest protest. Even worse, the Liberal Democrats will be voting yes at decision time. So much for opposition. Once again, the Scottish Conservatives are the only party standing up to the SNP and the left-wing Holyrood consensus. We have proposed a set of bold, common-sense solutions which support the aspiration of families and businesses across Scotland and let people keep more of the money they earn, including cutting income tax to 19% on earnings up to £43,662, saving the average worker £222 a year, exempting all pubs and restaurants from business rates, and cutting taxes for home buyers to help people climb the property ladder. These proposals would mean 6 in 7 Scots paying less income tax than their counterparts in the rest of the United Kingdom. At the same time, nearly 3,500 pubs and 3,000 restaurants would save an average of more than £15,400 and £20,000 respectively. That would be a true budget for growth. Presiding Officer, the SNP's 18 years in power can be summed up in 2 words: financial mismanagement. £30 million wasted on the doomed National Care Service. No, I think you should listen to this. £300 million on 2 delayed ferries, and more than £300,000 to defend the outrageous gender recognition reform bill. The list goes on and on. Had the SNP made better decisions, Scotland could be the most prosperous part of the United Kingdom. Instead of learning their lesson, the SNP have brought forward another high-tax budget which does little to right the 18 years of wrongs. Therefore, I will not be voting for it today.
Thank you, Ms Gozo. I now call Kevin Stewart to be followed by Pam Duncan-Clancy. Mr Stewart.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Last week, a good friend and former Aberdeen City Council colleague, Muriel Jaffrey, passed away. She served on Aberdeen City Council for 18 years, and she firmly believed that each of us who have the honour to be elected should always do our very best in terms of delivering for our constituents' needs. So I actually thank the Greens, the Liberal Democrats and Ash Regan for doing what they were elected to do, to stand up, to deliver for their constituents. And they have done a good service in terms of the negotiations that they have been involved in to deliver for people right across Scotland. It surprises me not, Presiding Officer, that the Tories are going to vote against SNP's Scottish Government budget, because, let's be honest with you, there's very little that they will vote for. But the disappointing thing is the Labour Party, as always. Mr Mara said in his speech that Labour moved decisively. They moved decisively to abstain. Their forebears must be wondering what is going on here, because the new Labour mantra is, "We'll keep the white flag flying here." They have no ability to offer anything to people out there, because they didn't even have the ability to deliver anything in this budget when they had the opportunity to do so. And I'll give way to Mr Mara.
Michael Mara.
I appreciate the member giving way. Does he not recognise, as his colleague perhaps neglected to, that £5.2 billion of additional funding for the Scottish Government has enabled the very many issues that he'll go on to highlight, I'm sure, in the positive aspects of his speech? That's what Labour has contributed to this budget today.
Kevin Stewart.
Scotland is not a charity. It's getting our own money back. And if Mr Mara was so keen to ensure that that investment was spent wisely, as he says he is, then he would have engaged, along with his colleagues, in helping shape this budget for Scotland. But instead, they choose to sit on their hands. They chose to abstain. They chose to raise and wave the white flag. That is Labour in Scotland. And they had the ability to back a budget which continues the social contract with the people of Scotland, which has been the SNP approach since we came to government in 2007. And what does that mean? That means free prescriptions, it means free university tuition, it means free school meals, it means free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as eligible 2-year-olds. It means free bus travel for 2.3 million people. It means an NHS free at the point of use, and it means 7 social security payments with no equivalent anywhere else in the UK, including the Scottish Child Payment. And it goes further. It goes further. with moves to eradicate the two-child cap and lift 15,000 children out of poverty, and the move to reintroduce winter fuel payments, which Labour cut for tens of thousands of people across Scotland. And beyond that, we have new policies coming into play, partly down to the negotiations that have taken place. A £2 bus fare cap pilot, which I hope will be carried out in the great city of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. I've already written to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport about this, and I wish that goes ahead in my own fair city of Aberdeen. So these are the things that this budget brings to the people of Scotland. It brings NHS investment up to a record level of £21.7 billion. It increases the local government settlement to a record £15 billion. It will restore that universal winter heating payment, as I mentioned earlier, and it will provide £768 million for affordable homes in our country. It triples the investment to £150 million for offshore wind, creating the jobs of the future, and it delivers £158 million of an uplift in education and skills. It will develop the necessary means to scrap that two-child cap. These are the great things that this budget delivers. It is just a pity that some folk have forgotten that they were elected here to serve the people, to deliver for the people, and they instead chose either to sit in their hands and not negotiate, or just constantly vote against. We are here to serve the people, and passing this budget will show that we are doing so.
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I call on Pam Duncan-Glancy to be followed by Stuart McMillan. Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And as we know, the SNP government's budget is set to pass today with support from the Scottish Greens and the Scottish Liberal Democrats. And whilst it is crucial that the record £5.2 billion of funding delivered by the UK Labour Government reaches frontline services, so we won't stand in the way of that, I think it is fair to say that this budget will not deliver the transformation needed. Because, Presiding Officer, the reality is that the SNP continue to take short-term decisions, reacting to events rather than making fundamental changes, disrupting services at short notice and restricting progress towards better, longer-term outcomes for people. There is no change of direction. And there are few areas that show this more clearly than in education, where I fear the lack of vision or different approach will deny young people the opportunities they so deserve. Presiding Officer, the SNP's failure to change direction from short-term solutions, reacting in the moment, or to properly plan for the delivery on the ground will leave teachers overworked, too few staff to support pupils with ASN, local authorities expected to perform budgetary miracles, and ultimately will hold Scotland's pupils back. Because whilst this government has made much of the fact that the draft budget sets out to maintain teacher numbers, I'll take it in a moment, it shows no awareness of the reality in schools, in other public services, in local communities that are crying out for support in how the budget will be delivered in reality. I'll take the intervention.
Emma Roddick.
To the member for taking the intervention, and I'm hearing her say that she's unhappy with the budget that's been presented, but could she give us a little bit more detail, because I'm unclear, and I think a lot of people outside are unclear, what Scottish Labour was demanding in exchange for supporting this budget.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the member for that intervention, and just 1 minute into my 6-minute contribution, so I have 5 more minutes to explain exactly why we don't think this budget changes direction or delivers for young people across Scotland. So the Government has said that there's an increase in the budget for teacher numbers, but in fact we know that £145 million of that was brought in during COVID, and it stayed at that level since it was introduced in 22-23. Councils are already using it for staff, All that's happened this year is the Government have added £41 million to recognise teacher pay and other costs that have risen since the funding was first introduced. Presiding Officer, this is not just about another broken manifesto promise of 3,500 more teachers. This is about this Government's long-standing focus on rhetoric without reforming the reality for our constituents. The lack of reform in education, plan or contact with delivering in reality doesn't address the fact that teachers are still working on average 11 hours per week unpaid. The pupil-teacher ratio in secondary schools is now the highest it's been in 20 years. Nearly 40% of pupils have additional support needs, yet the situation for them is intolerable. Waits for CAMS leave children in distress and unable to attend school. Parents are left fighting for everything their young person needs. There are teacher shortages in key subjects in some localities. Nor does it address the fact that only 25% of newly qualified teachers got permanent full-time jobs this year, leaving us in the ridiculous position of having gaps in the workforce and unemployed teachers. Is there possible for some time back?
There's a little bit of flexibility at this stage.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yes, I'll take the intervention from my colleague.
I'm grateful to the member for taking the intervention, and she is absolutely correct to lay out the massive challenges facing Scotland's teachers, and she clearly doesn't think the additional £41 million in the budget was enough. So could she clarify how much above that the Labour Party asked for during budget negotiations?
Pam Duncan-Clancy.
I thank the member for that intervention, but if the member had listened to the other parts of my contribution, he would have understood that this is about a direction of travel. This is about making sure we fundamentally change direction in Scotland, rather than plug holes and short-termism that this government is used to, leaving teachers, pupils and parents struggling in reality. What we need... I'll take one final intervention, Presiding
Cabinet
Officer.
Secretary Education.
I remember for giving way. I have to bring her back to the point she was making in relation to the increase in the funding the government is providing to local authorities to fund teacher numbers. But we are also providing additionality in the form of £29 million for additional support needs. I thought that was something that the member would have welcomed. I'm not quite sure why the member is not able to support that provision in the government's budget.
Pam Duncan-Clancy.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for pointing that out, and of course none of these interventions would have been possible without the £5.2 billion increase that the UK Labour Government have given and have delivered for the people across Scotland. And £29 million on ASN is less than £1 million per local authority at a time when the situation for young people with additional support needs is intolerable. A commitment, effectively, Presiding Officer, to stay the same as we were in 2023, with conditions attached but no reform or the resource needed, will be little comfort to staff in schools, pupils and parents desperate for a change of direction. Presiding Officer, the draft budget, we are told regularly by the Cabinet Secretary, and she's just pointed out just now, includes £29 million to fund the Government's ASN plan. But the updated additional support for learning plan published in November lacked detail on timescales or appropriate delivery to say what this money would do, and many of the Morgan recommendations remain unaddressed. And, for example, we still don't know what fundamental change is going to bring for support for learning around the scaffolding for children and young people, like having access to CAMS or educational psychology or speech and language therapy. But the Government has given no indication that it understands that these issues are crucial to addressing it. And the SNP's failures in education, I'm afraid, don't stop at schools. The Government's original commitment to the Whole Family Wellbeing Fund was £500 million over the life of the Parliament, but the total commitment has stalled. At a time when families are screaming out for help, the Government can't get its act together and spend the money that families need. And, Presiding Officer, despite rhetoric on a world-class skills system and warm words on a college-first approach, too many young people from the poorest backgrounds lose out on opportunities, and Colleges Scotland have said the Government's draft budget, and I quote, imposes an unsustainable financial burden on the sector, with a substantial risk of curriculum reductions, campus closures and reduced opportunities for learners. There's no change in direction for universities either, with a 0.7% real terms cut proposed on top of previous funding cuts, which universities have all warned will lead to drastic action to address deficits, including job losses, recruitment freezes and restructuring plans. I also wonder how the real terms cut of 3.2% to student support will help with the trend of more students dropping out. If this government is serious about a college-first approach and serious about universities becoming beacons for the world and remaining beacons for the world, as it says it is, then this action is far removed from rhetoric. And if it's serious about skills and growing the economy, then leaving crucial initiatives like the developing the young workforce who are working in schools, dedicated to embedding practical work-based learning into the curriculum and providing opportunities for pupils to access pathways into employment, leaving them in limbo is short-sighted. Ultimately, Presiding Officer, Despite a record funding delivered by the UK Labour Government, this SNP budget will not bring about the transformation needed in education to ensure opportunity for all. Scotland really can be a land of opportunity. I honestly believe our best days lie ahead, but it is clearer now than ever that only Scottish Labour can deliver the new direction that Scotland needs. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Duncan Clancy. I now call Stuart McMillan to be followed by Liz Smith. Ms McMillan.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I support this budget, and I believe that the budget provides additional investment in our public services, which is what the people of Scotland actually want to see. Now, the First Minister has made clear his focus is on delivering on the people's priorities. That's eradicating child poverty, growing the economy, improving public services like our NHS, and also tackling the climate emergency. Now, these are things I don't think anyone in the Chamber could actually disagree with. Now, the Scottish Government has listened carefully to the needs and priorities of organisations and businesses across the country and engaged seriously and also constructively with other parties, as we now know, with the fact that the Scottish Greens, the Scottish Liberal Democrats and Alba are going to agree to the budget. Now, Presiding Officer, I want to highlight some of the announcements from the budget that will actually have a tangible and positive benefit for my Greenock and Inverclyde constituency. Firstly, the commitment to deliver a record £2 billion increase in frontline NHS spending. Now, this takes overall health and social care investment to over £21 billion, including an increase in capital spending power of £139 million. Now, I'm sure that colleagues from across the Chamber can relate to one key issue, and that's that health is one of the main issues that leads to constituents contacting our offices and seeking assistance. Now, their concerns can range from small points of clarification to major issues that have occurred over several months or years. Now, regardless, it's clear that our NHS is beloved by the people across Scotland, and seeing additional investment going into services to ensure that improvements actually happen at scale and pace is very much welcome news. And importantly, the extra capital investment provides NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde with the opportunity to actually progress plans for some of its capital projects. Now, we all know that certainly in recent years there has been major issues with regards to progressing capital projects, primarily because of the huge cost of construction inflation. Now, I have lobbied consistently for a new Port Glasgow Health Centre, which I know is a priority for the Health Board, and I will continue to lobby for it until it's delivered. Another key announcement is the delivery of the real terms uplift of 3% for spending on education and skills to maintain teacher levels and also invest in school infrastructure, as well as the new funding to put more breakfast clubs in primary schools. Now, this will have a positive impact on children and young people across Inverclyde. Now, the announcement regarding the £34 million uplift to the culture budget this year, the largest ever funding commitment for Scotland's cultural sector, is also hugely positive. In Inverclyde, the Beacon Arts Centre and Rig Arts will benefit, receiving multi-year funding awards from Creative Scotland, totalling over £1.5 million. Now, this will enable the two organisations to increase accessibility to culture and also the arts, and also collaborate with other local groups on projects that enrich my constituency and also beyond. Another budget commitment I welcome is the £4.9 billion investment into tackling the climate and nature emergencies. And also, boosting fair green economic growth is central to the delivery of the Scottish Government's priorities, and prioritising the transition to net zero will benefit everyone through the growth of a strong, growing green economy. Now, I'm therefore pleased that the budget will invest in the work to, first of all, scale up the renewable energy, restore Scotland's natural environment, expand our public transport and active travel networks, and also support a step change in how we actually heat our homes. Now, the final key budget commitment I want to focus on is the record local government settlement, which includes a £1 billion uplift to £15 billion. Now, this enables councils to deliver the services that people rely upon, and delivering the pay increases agreed for our teachers, social care workers, refuse collectors and more. Now, yet, while the Scottish Government delivers more funding for local authorities, the UK Government will remove a huge chunk of this investment through their increase to the employers' national insurance contributions. Now, for Inverclyde, this is estimated to cost some £3 million. So the local government settlement from the Scottish Government is the result of meaningful budget engagement. Now, it's therefore hugely disappointing that the Labour UK government has failed to thoroughly engage with the Scottish Government on their tax on jobs, on their NI hike, which undermines the increases in funding for Scotland's public sector and third sector organisations. And I'll put on record with third sector organisations that I chair Moving On Inverclyde, a local recovery service. I'll take the intervention.
Michael Mara, briefly. I think it's right, certainly, that the member highlights the challenges this presents for both businesses, third sector and public sector across Scotland. That's clearly the case. It's a difficult decision that the Chancellor has taken. How does the member think that the money should have been raised to supply the £5.2 billion that he's talked about in the first part of his speech, if he's completely opposed how the money was raised? What's his alternative?
Stuart McMillan.
Mr Mara will very much recognise that Scotland, as my colleague Kevin Stewart earlier on said, Scotland is not a charity. Scotland is a country. And certainly with regards to how the UK government actually gets money, the UK government has got full access to the powers, unlike the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Parliament, Mr Mara is shaking his head. The Scottish Parliament has limited powers, and he should know that. Now, I am conscious of time, Presiding Officer. So, Presiding Officer, over the last 2 years, I just want to finish on this point. Over the last 2 years, the Labour Party demo has taken place outside of my constituency office, claiming that the budget settlement has been fair for local government. Thus far, I have not yet received any notification of any such demo, but maybe the Inverclyde Labour will actually be holding a demo outside of the Labour Party MP's office, instead calling for the full cost of the National Insurance Contribution Bill to be paid back to Scotland, and for Inverclyde to actually get that £3 million back that's going to be grabbed by the Chancellor. So with that, I will back the budget, and I encourage all parties to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Liz Smith to be followed by Emma Roddick. Up to 6 minutes. Ms Smith.
Thank you. I think the Chamber is very well aware of the Finance Committee's concern about several key issues over the course of this budget process. Firstly, that there is no discernible improvement in widening the tax base, and that's something I hear the Deputy First Minister quite rightly referring to on quite a regular basis. The persistently higher tax rates being levied on those on medium and higher earners are not delivering the extent of the tax revenues that are needed to pay for the projected increases in public expenditure, and of course that public sector reform is too slow and lacking in convincing evidence. But perhaps the biggest concern for the Finance Committee, as it is for the Scottish Fiscal Commission and for Audit Scotland, is that there is a lack of long-term planning for fiscal sustainability, and, just as importantly, a complete lack of clarity from the Scottish Government when it comes to the Finance Committee's repeated requests for how ministers will create that financial sustainability in the future. And I want to put this all in the context of social security. We know from what Spice has said that, and I quote, the Scottish Government decisions on social security have cumulatively added significant cost pressures to its budget. We know too that the Scottish Fiscal Commission has calculated that social security payments in 25-26 will cost £1,334 million more than they would have done had we remained on UK levels, and that figure is going to rise to £1,463 million in 29-30, and that's not accounting for inflation. Now, that's why the convener of the Finance Committee in his speech last week asked the Scottish Government how it would assess the long-term affordability and sustainability of its social security policies and their impact on other areas of spend. In response, what we got from the Scottish Government was this, and I quote, "We continue to take a responsible and capable approach to Scotland's finances as new budget pressures emerge, monitoring all areas of expenditure during the year, prioritising and maximising efficiencies." Well, it was little wonder then that the committee, unanimously I may say, did not consider that to be adequate response, because quite frankly it tells us nothing, except perhaps that the Scottish Government really doesn't know where the money is coming from to pay for that very high social security budget, and that has obviously ballooned out of control in recent months. Now, the truth is, and I was interested in Michelle Thompson's note in the Chamber just now, I was interested in the debate we had about the social contract. That social contract could be very important, but there's no point having a social contract with the people of Scotland if you can't fund all the payments that you want to make, and we're certainly not in any position at the moment to be able to do that. And I think the Cabinet Secretary knows that well, as she debates this issue as well. Because it's all well and good promising the earth and when it comes to free benefits and to mitigations, but the Scottish Government is simply not able to fund all this given the current expenditure forecast. It keeps telling us that there will be very significant savings to come from public service reform, from digitisation, from a better workforce planning. But as the Finance Committee said, it's very hard to see the evidence of that, and clearly it's not going to happen for this budget. Now let me come to the Scottish Conservatives policy on benefits. Are we committed to the welfare state? Absolutely we are, in order to provide a helping hand to those most in need. Did we vote for the Social Security Scotland Act in 2018? Yes, we did, because we believed that the new devolved benefits would be better administered in Scotland, even if many, if I may just finish this point, even if many of the principles underpinning the system are much the same as those under the DWP. And did we vote for the Scottish Child Payment in 2021? Yes, we did, because we agreed with the sentiments of the Scottish Government about addressing child poverty, and I believe that recent evidence shows that's the correct decision.
Deputy First Minister.
I thank Liz Smith for taking the intervention. I'm often struck by the point she's just identified, where the Conservatives obviously have a different approach to the SNP on matters of taxation and budget spend, but are always consistent in pushing us to go further in spending more on welfare when it comes to really specific examples. And does she think that it requires a little bit more of financial arithmetic to understand that when the party pushes the government to go further in certain spend, which probably happens on a daily basis, you can't marry that with reducing tax?
Liz Smith.
Minister, what matters is what the evidence is saying, and we're very clear that where the payments should be made when it comes to welfare payments, where it's very clear that this is the case when it comes to the child payment, that evidence shows that that is a decent benefit. But there are lots of other areas where that is not the case. For example, we now know that there are many more people in Scotland staying on the caseload when it comes to welfare benefits. That's not the case down south. And we also know that within the one case of just a one-year change in the budget, the increase in the child benefit payment is going to go up by 37%. And as far as I can see as yet, we've not had any explanation as to why that is. So, yes, there's a balance to be said, but it's important that when we're looking at the welfare side of things, that we're making a calculation where the evidence shows that these benefits are helpful, but not for ones where quite clearly I think we're on a trajectory that, as I say, we simply can't afford it. Simply can't afford it at all. So I will finish on that point, because I think when it comes to the welfare spend, it is absolutely essential that we do not go on with the current system that we have, because we simply can't afford it. There's a spiralling set of benefits in this country at the moment, and yet the Scottish Government hasn't got the money to pay for them. That's simple arithmetic to me, it's simple economics, and I think that's where the Scottish Government should listen a lot to what the Finance Committee is saying.
Thank you, Ms Smith. And I call Emma Roddick to be followed by Mark Griffin. Up to 6 minutes. Ms Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On complex tasks like setting the budget, I think that people really do want to see politicians from different parties sitting down and working together. So I was really glad to see the Greens and Lib Dems doing exactly that, sitting down with the SNP, working on more money for hospices like the Highland Hospice, giving Orkney Islands Council more flexibility with its settlement and extending free school meals even further. These are all excellent policies, and meanwhile Labour has said they'll abstain. Now, I expect the Tories to oppose the SNP's budget. Listening to the contributions this afternoon, they want tax cuts for the wealthy, while we continue to expect those who have the most to contribute the most. But Labour's early announcement that its MSPs were going to take no interest in deciding how money in Scotland is going to be spent was genuinely surprising to me. We are supposed to believe that Labour is ready for government, but Labour MSPs won't even talk about governing. And I do wonder how much of their resistance to take part in this process is a result of an inability to challenge their London bosses or reconcile their vague calls for a new direction with what their own party has decided to do and say on welfare. Yes, I will.
Michael Marr.
I thank the member for giving way. I can assure her that I met with the Cabinet Secretary and the Finance Secretary on numerous occasions when we had discussions about the direction of the budget. Unfortunately, the request that I was making about a change of direction for Scotland, a new approach to the delivery of public services, was not met. So I can assure the dialogue was there. Unfortunately, they didn't rise to that challenge.
Emma Roddick.
It may have been only a few short weeks ago that Labour announced in the press that it wasn't going to be making any further demands on the Scottish budget, but it was certainly a long enough time for them to negotiate something in the way that other parties have managed to, in a respectful and constructive way. And I do think that a budget that's seeking to mitigate UK Labour's frankly terrible decisions to keep the Tory two-child cap, hike employers' national insurance contributions and remove money from pensioners to support them with heating bills over the winter would be quite an embarrassing one for Labour MSPs to vote against when they're still trying to trick folk into believing that their beliefs are different to Keir Starmer's and not directed by him. And maybe that's why they've decided to sit it out entirely. Because the budget is the biggest opportunity that individual MSPs have to directly influence what the coming year is going to look like and what priorities will be getting the most funding. And they have chosen to abstain. Scotland needs action to protect our communities, public services and pensioners from Labour's disastrous first choices in government. From restoring a universal winter heating payment to looking at how we can mitigate the two-child cap, the Scottish Budget has committed £210 million to directly mitigate Labour's policies. The national insurance hike has terrified everyone from local authorities to social care providers, be it childcare, nursing homes or third sector organisations. And it's likely that the cost to our public services in Scotland will be £700 million. SCVO says that the voluntary sector is likely to see £75 million gone, and culture organisations who are excited about the Scottish Government's uplift to their budgets now worry that much of that new money is going to be swallowed by a tax on jobs. Yes, I will.
Briefly, Michael Mann.
I appreciate the member giving way again. And just she recognise that for those welcome spending commitments and those have to be paid for. And where does she think the money should come from if she's opposed to every other means by which the money was actually raised?
Emma Roddick.
I think the money should come from where it does for every normal independent country, through the revenue and financial powers that we would have if we could take all of our decisions in this place, rather than relying on the whims of a Labour government which is taking with one hand while giving with the other. And I think Scottish Labour MSPs could not come here today and brag about how much money the Scottish Government has to invest in Scotland if they had actually tried to design a budget, because then they'd actually have to look at how much it is costing to undo the damage that UK Labour is doing and how much the national insurance hike is going to cost everyone. Scottish Labour isn't willing to help us protect people from these terrible decisions. They also won't vote for a £2 billion increase in frontline NHS spending. They won't vote for a record £15 billion for local government. They won't vote for concrete action on climate change and an uplift to the culture budget. And it's not because they didn't get their way and they negotiated and didn't get enough. It's because they announced in the press from the off that they were going to abstain without bothering to talk it through first. And I'm not sure what message that is supposed to send to our constituents, other than Scottish Labour is aimless, pointless and can't be bothered. And thanks to these commitments to abstain, the SNP didn't actually need to negotiate with other parties. But the Scottish Government has done some grown-up politics, sat down with others anyway and worked out a deal. And that means that this budget is a compromise which recognises the priorities of those across Scotland who didn't vote SNP at the last elections. It is a budget by Scotland for Scotland. And that's why it invests in housing, £768 million to the housing programme to deliver at least 8,000 more homes. And I'm delighted that after engaging with the Cabinet Secretary and her predecessors on the issue, young islanders under 22 will be able to access inter-island ferry transport in the same way that the bus scheme supports mainland kids to use buses. The budget also protects free prescriptions, free university tuition, free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds, and NHS free at the point of use. These are not new policies, but be in no doubt that funding for them is not a given. It does depend on who is sitting on that front bench. Last week we heard Scottish Labour dismiss universal free prescriptions as a good headline. And every other month somebody suggests that privatisation might be a good thing for the NHS. Now, I don't remember a Scotland without an SNP government, and we have always remained steadfast in our commitment to these policies. So I understand that people are used to them, maybe even take them for granted, but we can't. If you value these things, remember who delivered them for the best part of 2 decades, and remember what we've managed to do with the limited powers of devolution, and imagine what we could do with the full powers of an independent country.
Thank you. Before calling the next speaker, just to advise the Chamber that we have exhausted any time we had in hand, so speakers will have to stick to their speaking allocations. I now call Mark Griffin to be followed by Alexander Stewart. Up to 6 minutes. Mr Griffin.
Thank you, President Officer. In last week's debate, I was struck by an SNP speaker's contribution that this was, and I quote, a good and a clever budget. Now, I believe that a good budget provides the financial backing to deliver the priorities of its government. And John Swinney has repeatedly said that this is to tackle child poverty. But in my mind, it's impossible to tackle child poverty without first making sure that every child has a warm, secure and affordable house to live in. And it's impossible to tackle child poverty without relying on the services and support provided by local government across Scotland. I'm just into my speech. Maybe I'll make some progress and come back to the Cabinet Secretary. Now, I welcome the Government's decision to reverse last year's cut to the affordable housing programme. That is a good decision, or I should say it's part of a good decision, because what the Government is not saying is that it actually cut the affordable housing supply budgets twice. It cut it last year and the year before. And that full cut over the 2 years has not been restored. And the Government's approach to affordable housing is one of the clearest indicators of what the Accounts Commission has called short-term thinking that balances budgets but disrupts services and restricts progress towards long-term outcomes. Now, during the chaos unleashed by this Government's housing budget cuts, we know that so far over 500 more children woke up in temporary homes. As Shelter Scotland Director Alison Watson said, no child should be living in poverty, and the only way to eradicate child poverty is to end child homelessness. Now, far from ending it, in its time in government, the SNP has seen the number of kids in temporary homes almost double, increasing by 85% from 2007 until 2024. And while I do welcome the partial reinstatement of those desperately needed funding, I think that it is important to set out what the Government's disastrous approach has done to the supply of affordable housing in Scotland, because we're just not building enough homes. And astonishingly, the SNP's latest affordable housing pledge actually promises a drop in the number of affordable homes being built. The Government has said that this year's affordable homes budget would enable, and I'm quoting, over 8,000 new properties this coming year. The Cabinet Secretary said in her speech that this budget will build more affordable homes. This is the lowest number of new affordable homes in any year since 2016-17, excluding the pandemic. For the last 3 years, even amidst the most brutal cuts to the affordable housing supply budget, between 9,500 and 10,400 new affordable homes were completed every year. I can only assume that this attempt to present failure as success means that this Government are quietly giving up on their pledge to build 110,000 homes by 2032. Yeah, I'll take Mr McMillan.
McMillan, briefly.
I thank Mark Griffin for taking intervention. So if Mr Griffin is wanting even more resource to go into the housing budget, from which budget would he take it from? Would it be health? Would it be a local government?
Mark Griffin.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that the UK Government has provided this Parliament, this budget, with £5.2 billion in extra funding. And instead of making the transformative change to lift kids out of poverty, to put them into the houses that they need, they're simply fixing the problems that they've made over the past 18 years, restoring and not even fully restoring the cuts that have been made in last year's budget. The budget before does not go anywhere near the ambition that we have for this country. I'll take the Cabinet Secretary.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley Ann Summer.
Grateful for Mark Griffin for giving way. Can we just get down to actually how much Mr Griffin's party asked for during the budget negotiations and what he did to actually deliver that? He heard what the First Minister said earlier on. If Labour want to get on board, they need to come forward with proposals. The door is still open, but that's what we're looking for, is constructive opportunities to have that. Mr Griffin's not taking that up.
Mark Griffin.
We've been clear. The reason that this government has extra money to spend, £5.2 billion, is because of a Labour government delivering for Scotland. We expect to see transformation in our public services.
Let's listen to the member.
What my frontbench colleagues have constructively asked for in dialogue with the Finance Cabinet Secretary and Ministers is transformation of the public sector in Scotland, using that funding not to fix the problems that the SNP have made for themselves in the past. And that's been borne out by the reaction to this budget by organisations.
Mr Griffin doesn't have time.
Last minute, I'm told there's no time in hand. But organisation after organisation, report after report from Audit Scotland, the Accounts Commission that we heard from at the Local Government Committee this morning, have made it clear that this is a short-term fix budget. There is no forward thinking. This will not address the fundamental problems that the Scottish Government themselves have stored up for the last 17 years. I think the other area that I wanted to touch on, that I mentioned that we can't tackle child poverty, is again on local government. Now, the local government budget has increased. It's a welcome increase, but again, it will not go to cover the last 10 years' worth of budget cuts, which is a cumulative £6 billion of cuts. It's clear that the biggest demonstration in this budget is that this government has run out of ideas, that we need a new direction, and that comes with a new Labour government.
Thank you. I now call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Keith Brown. Up to 6 minutes. Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After the low-growth, anti-job autumn budget from UK Labour Government, many stakeholders were hoping that the Scottish Government and the Scottish Budget would deliver the support that public services are crying out for right now. None more so than councils who have spent the last decade having to deal with a series of long and real-term cuts, while at the same time being asked to deliver more and more services. Reports by Spice shows that across the last 10 years, total local government funding has fallen as a percentage of the Scottish Government's budget. The consequences are clear to see here, Presiding Officer. Last year's Local Government Information Survey asked senior council... I'll make some progress and come back to you, Cabinet Secretary. Survey asked senior council representatives whether they thought the current local government finances were sustainable. Not a single respondent said yes. Not a single respondent said yes, something which is previously unprecedented, Presiding Officer. On top of this, respondents from 23 separate councils indicated that unless they were being passed the balances that they had, they would find it really difficult to budget in at least 1 year of the financial processes, and they would not be able to balance their budgets for at least 1 year in the 5 years that are going forward. And when we look at this week's report by Audit Scotland and the Commission talked about more concerning, and the reports make it very concerning. Councils are facing unprecedented futures, and they are uncertain about where their departments and where their opportunities are to ensure that they can balance their budgets. The scale of uncertainty means that only around half councils have long-term financial plans put in place, and I'll take the Cabinet Secretary.
Cabinet Secretary.
So this year's budget 25-26 includes a real terms increase for local government. How does Alexander Stewart reconcile with £1 billion of tax cuts that his party wants to deliver? What impact would that have on the local government settlement?
Alexander Stewart.
Grow the economy, Cabinet Secretary. You cannot say over the last decade, for the last 10 years, you have systematically.
Mr. Stewart, through the chair, please.
Cabinet Secretary, you have systematically
through the chair,
removed,
Mr. Stewart,
Presiding Officer, millions and billions of pounds out of local government. Presiding Officer, none of these paint the picture of a Scottish Government which has the interests of local government at their heart. As it stands, councils across Scotland are sceptical of what it means for long-term for council funding. Indeed, COSLA has made it abundantly clear that budgets will not receive the impact that is required to improve services. And we all know no, thank you, Mr McMillan. We all know what's happening across our own constituencies and our own regions. No doubt members will be well aware of examples within their own constituencies and their own regions where funding is being squeezed. My own region, Perth and Kinross, Stirling, Clackmannanshire, all have been forced to cut numerous services to deal with increasing pressures on budgets in recent years. Key services have been stripped back over the last years. Funding for local halls, funding has been slashed for libraries, funding for opportunities to deal with leisure. All of these are under huge strain going forward. And we talked today about the uncertainty of the national employers' national insurance contributions. And yes, the Cabinet Secretary has already indicated that there will be a 60% uplift. But that's still not enough. It will still add percentages onto council taxes, and the gap has not been filled. These additional costs will be also for partner organisations who will need to deliver services, as well as that over the councils themselves. At the beginning of the year, COSLA and the Scottish Government talked directly to the UK Chancellor about supporting things. But months on, we still have not got the full package. We still are. And I would suggest that the Cabinet Secretary and the Government continue to work on this issue. Presiding Officer, over the last 18 years, the SNP have demonstrated that this Government, they do not see local government as one of their priorities. They do not see businesses as one of their priorities. They do not see communities as one of their priorities. Despite something talking a big game and talking, it has never been the case that the SNP have put their money where their mouth is. This is the government that announced a brand new relationship for local government, which was promised that there would be better engagement, there would be better budgetary processes. That hasn't happened. However, what we've seen is a squeeze on local government, and every single council across Scotland will be having to put up a council tax later on in the next few weeks. So as we talk about the Verity House Agreement, that still is looking at where we will for the warm aspects of this government. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, it is high time that this SNP government recognise the value and the role that councils play in our communities across Scotland. It is also time for them to deliver a common sense budget which also shows councils and gives the councils the respect that they deserve when looking after the communities. It's time for individuals to stand up. They're failing the individuals, they're failing communities, and Scottish people are having to pay the price. The SNP have failed business, the SNP have failed communities, and the SNP have failed councils. And that's one reason, and many reasons, why I will not be supporting this budget at stage 1 today, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I now call Keith Brown to be followed by John Mason. Up to 6 minutes. Mr Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I, first of all, refer members to my register of interests? And also, can I say well done to the Cabinet Secretary for the work that she's put in so far. It's not an easy process, as well as her civil servants and colleagues in the Scottish Government. And also include within that the Greens and the Lib Dems, who have taken a positive, constructive approach to the very serious business of ensuring that funds are available for public services in Scotland. I think it's worth mentioning as well there are some very good things in this budget. We're being asked to support the general principles. I'm very pleased about the local government uplift. I think whatever our party here, we can all acknowledge the fact that it's been a difficult few years for local government because of budget settlements from elsewhere. And I think it's a great relief to see a real uplift for local government services. Also, in relation to health, I have cause currently to interact with the health service a great deal, and I can say that my own experience is that people are absolutely fed up with the work that they are doing being denigrated in this place on a weekly basis. They know they are better paid, they know there is more money coming to the health service. Of course there are challenges, but they provide an absolutely excellent service, and it's good to see the uplift being attributed to health as well. Similarly, in relation to police, again, a tough time for our police force, but again, they, at every single level in Scotland, are paid higher than their counterparts elsewhere in the UK, something we shouldn't let this budget pass without being grateful that it's going to continue. And as has been mentioned by a couple of members, free prescriptions. We sometimes forget how important these are to people across the country, as well as tuition fees. If you see some of the horror stories down south just now, from the fact that people are facing tuition fee debts of hundreds of thousands of pounds, apart from the disincentive for others to go on to further and higher education. This means this is a crippling start to people's working lives, and we're not going to have that in Scotland, just as we're not going to have the bedroom tax once again. Something we used to hear a great deal about, but not so much these days. I think it's also true to say that we should recognise that we have a public-owned train company in this country which is deemed to be the best operating in the UK. And I think that's great to see that continuing under this. I very much welcome the proposal to have the trial period with a cap on bus fares. I wouldn't propose it for this Parliament. It may be something that comes back in future, but it may be at some point we have to consider a completely free bus service for the benefits it could provide to the environment and to people across the country. But it's a great initiative to see if we can start that process off. Over and above, of course, two things really should be mentioned. One is the action on the two-child cap, which you've heard so little from either side of the chamber, which is so important to many people, and of course the action being taken on the winter fuel allowance. And given all those benefits which I've just mentioned, it does seem to me absolutely astonishing that, first of all, they'll be opposed by the Tory party and they will not be supported by the Labour Party. And let's look at the Tories. Well, the Tories will vote against and Labour won't support, but the Tories, I could not believe when I heard Pam Gosal accuse this government of financial incompetence. I mean, if we're talking about the government of Liz Truss, that is the very acme of financial incompetence from the Tories. But let's look at more detail at their track record. Of course, they have now got a situation where they have the higher tax. People in England pay higher tax than the majority of people in Scotland. They don't like that fact, but it's simply a fact. The majority of people in Scotland pay less tax than the rest of the UK. They have brought in the highest tax burden since the Second World War. The highest tax burden since the Second World War. If you can be brief, I'll give way.
Liz Smith, briefly.
The member how he reacts to the comments from the Scottish Fiscal Commission that we don't have anything like the tax base that we need, or indeed the amount of revenue coming in to pay for all his projected free services.
Keith Brown.
My view is this budget is going to be balanced, and it's been balanced every year. The Cabinet Secretary will ensure that happens, so I'm content with that. It's also true to say, of course, the Tories have brought in a debt of £1.7 trillion. That's the financial mismanagement. That's nearly 100% of GDP. That's the Tories' track record of 14 years of failed austerity. But really, the big story here is the Labour Party. They're going to abstain. To abstain means, one of the dictionary definitions is to refrain from performing a duty. And that's exactly what they're doing here. They have a duty to participate in this Parliament, to make decisions for the benefit of the people of Scotland. Simply opting out because you've got difficult choices is not good enough. And it is one reason, amongst many, why you're slipping down the polls in the way that you are. The Tories are now, I don't know if it's fourth or fifth behind Reform and various others, but Labour is just tumbling down the polls. And this is one reason. The lack of decision-making, the lack of principle, the lack of conviction, which we're seeing from the Labour Party here. Why can't you support something that's going to try and address a two-child cap? You've said you're against it. Why can't you support something? Why can't the Labour Party support something which is going to address the horrendous decision to cut the winter fuel allowance? You would think you would jump at the opportunity to do that. So I think it's very clear to me. And also, we've heard a great deal, both from the Conservatives and the Labour Party. They're very much in favour of reform, even to the extent they're willing to give their votes away to the Reform Party, as we can see. And to read today that Anis Sarwar is willing to work with Nigel Farage on a case-by-case basis. That gives the game away as to what kind of Labour Party we currently have in this Parliament. This is a very good budget. Of course, it should be open to influence and open to amendment. It's a very good budget. If you don't have any decent ideas, and if you can't say where you're going to take the cuts from, they've been asked a number of times, where's the Tory party going to get its tax cuts from? Is it local government? Is it transport? Is it health? Yep. You won't say because you can't say. This is a good budget, and I would urge the Chamber to support it.
Thank you. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, after which we will move to closing speeches. John Mason, up to 4 minutes, please. Mr Mason.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in the budget again today. Just to touch on some of the points I made in Thursday's debate, I do think that the fiscal framework is biased against Scotland and needs a fundamental review. UK and Scottish taxes are too low overall, and if we want quality public services, if we want quality public services such as a country like Denmark has, then we need to fundamentally increase our taxation. Thirdly, a replacement for council tax has been dragging on for far too long, and eventually somebody has to bite the bullet on this. I very much doubt that we will ever get complete consensus as to what the replacement should be, so we just need to get on with as many parties on board as we can. Now, I'm broadly supportive of this year's budget and will be voting for it at decision time. There are a lot of good things in there, including increased funding for the NHS and for local government, and in particularly increased capital funding for more affordable housing. And let's just remember that the Scottish budget has only been increasing by 0.8% in real terms, not the huge increase that Labour have been suggesting. Now, we hear of conflicting and contradictory claims around budget time, and not least these come from the Conservatives, who tell us on the one hand to cut tax, and on the other hand ask for more funding for their favourite projects. Now, the Finance Committee and others have been called for more medium and long-term planning for Scotland's finances, and one of the issues with the fiscal framework as it stands is the lack of borrowing capacity. Also, longer-term financial stability surely means putting money aside in the good years, as Norway has done and as the UK has failed to do, so that there is more money for manoeuvre when the next rainy day inevitably comes, be that another pandemic or something else. However, assuming we are going to be borrowing to some extent, the question of whether we use Scottish Government bonds as one of the methods is the next question. The committee is asked to be kept updated, and we look forward to hearing from the Government in due course about that. Now, whether local authorities are going to feel that they have been generously treated or not remains to be seen. Perhaps it was unwise to freeze council tax last year, but we are where we are, and we all see the needs around us at a local level, be that in the state of the roads, pressure on refuse collection and recycling budgets, or cuts to libraries and leisure services. I fear that increasing council funding by inflation or just a little bit more will not cut it in the longer term. The needs are increasing. Now, it's all very well saying, as the Conservatives do, that we have to be competitive in taxation, which presumably means that we do not differ too much from what England does. But the problem is that if English taxes are too low, and if their old people, for example, cannot get a care home placed when they need it, we do not want to be copying and competing with that. And on the theme of following England or the rest of the UK, I do think we need to break this fixation of following London spending. After all, devolution is about making our own decisions and using the resources we have where the need is greatest, and that might or might not be the same as the rest of the UK. For example, there have been repeated calls to copy hospitality reliefs available down south, and the Scottish Government has agreed to do that to some extent, I think very generously in my opinion. Yet, we may get a Barnett allocation because of actions at Westminster. That money is not ring-fenced, and we may well see a higher priority need in Scotland. Now, of course, MSPs' salaries are part of the budget process, although many might feel uncomfortable talking about them. The proposal is to increase them to £74,500, and many of us might have a tendency to look at others who are better paid, including MPs at £91,000 and Welsh MSs at £76,000. However, it is also good to remember that the full new state pension from April this year will be £12,000, so I would maintain that we are very well paid at 6 times that amount, and I certainly think we should be grateful for it. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Mason. We now move to closing speeches. I call Ross Greer first, up to 6 minutes. Mr Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In my opening speech, I talked about some of the proposals that the Greens put forward in the budget and that were agreed, but I didn't cover all of them. So I want to start off just by listing most, not all, of what we were able to secure in this budget. A record £4.9 billion for climate and nature. That includes the £26 million for the Nature Restoration Fund that I mentioned earlier on. That's going towards projects like the restoration of our Atlantic rainforest. Scotland, once not that long ago, had a rainforest. We now only have tiny fragments of it left, but through the NRF and other funds, we're reconnecting them and rebuilding that ecosystem. We asked ahead of the budget that the A96 climate compatibility assessment be published, and it was, and we're pleased to see that there's no money allocated for dualling this year, just for the much-needed bypasses, which we support, as well as the £2 trial of the bus fare cap. There's £10 million for a bus infrastructure fund and the rollout of free bus travel for asylum seekers. There's money there for the rollout of 20 mile an hour speed limits in built-up areas. We saw just last week the immediate impact that has had in Wales, the many lives that have been saved as a result of moving to a 20 mile an hour default there. We're delivering more free ferry travel for young islanders, £172 million added back into the affordable housing budget. We've increased the tax paid on the purchase of second and holiday homes, not just raising in the region of £32 million for our public services, but giving first-time buyers more support that they need in a very competitive housing market. And this month, the consultation will be launched on proposals for a cruise ship levy, a power much needed by local authorities like Inverclyde in my own region. And I do want to congratulate the Lib Dems. They have a solid list of achievements that they can claim credit for in this budget, particularly the support for babies born addicted to drugs. And I'll certainly be proud to vote for a budget that includes that funding. I would respectfully ask Alex Cole-Hamilton, in response to comments he made earlier, if he could point out the budget line that the Lib Dems have apparently deleted relating to independence, because the Constitutional Projects Division that has existed for many years continues to exist. That funding is still in the budget. Now, Craig Hoy and our Conservative colleagues spent this afternoon warning us all that there's a spectre haunting Scotland, the spectre of socialism. Now, if only that was the case, Mr Hoy. Unfortunately, the powers afforded to this place under devolution are not quite enough to bring down global capitalism, but if we all try a little bit harder, I'm sure we can make a bit more progress. Now, if there actually was a socialist majority in this Parliament, we would see boosting trade union membership, particularly in the private sector, as one of, if not the key way to boost wages, as it has always been. That's certainly something that the Greens have pushed for. But one socialist change that the Greens have delivered in recent years is in the redistribution of wealth, changing Scotland's income tax system. So most people pay a little bit less, those on higher incomes pay more, and that is worth £1.7 billion a year to our public services. That goes towards delivery of things like the Scottish Child Payment and free school meals that lift children out of poverty. It contributes towards the fact that our NHS staff are the best paid in the UK. So it's clear that the election of Scottish Greens to this place is a way to deliver the socialist change that Craig Hoy warns us all about. I do want to touch again on the contribution that Michael Mara and Labour colleagues made, because it seems that Labour's argument this afternoon is that Scottish Labour's contribution to the budget is the £5 billion of consequentials from the UK government. Now, being generous, that would be an argument for the election of Scottish Labour MPs. But I hate to break it to our Labour colleagues here, they are not MPs. They are MSPs, members of this Parliament, who had the opportunity to negotiate to include their priorities in this budget and declined to do so. So I'm not quite sure what kind of advert that is for the value of voting for Scottish Labour ahead of next year's Scottish election. But sticking to socialism, one area that the Greens are particularly proud to have achieved in the area of public sector reform is the 4-day working week, because we don't live to work, and workers deserve a better work-life balance, and the rollout of those trials across the public sector has, from the initial evidence that the Finance Committee took, been met with huge success, a dramatic reduction in ill health amongst the staff involved and no apparent loss of productivity. There is a need to do far more, though, and I do absolutely agree with the Cabinet Secretary on the need to have some long-term certainty from the UK Government, but where I agree with Liz Smith is that that's no reason for the Scottish Government not to get on with its own planning now. Now, of course, Liz Smith and I would come up with very different spending plans if that was our responsibility, but there's no reason not to make progress on that at this point. Even just scenario planning would be of great benefit to the resilience of our public services. I think the debate this afternoon, though, has really shown the dividing line in the final 12 months or 13 or so months of this Parliament. The dividing line is between those who are here to play games and grab headlines and those who are here to deliver real change for their constituents. Now, we might all disagree on what that change is, that's absolutely fine, but surely we were elected on manifestos full of specific policy proposals, the delivery of the change that we all actually believe in, and some of us are trying to pursue that. The Greens, who were elected to this place, have delivered more free school meals for the children who need it, free bus travel for young people, and now a trial of capping bus fares to make them cheaper for everyone. Nature restoration funding and the job creation that comes with that, record funding for climate action. The Scottish Greens were elected here to deliver for people and planet, and by voting for the budget this afternoon, with the changes that we have secured, we are fulfilling that promise.
Thank you. I now call Paul O'Kane up to 7 minutes. Mr O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I rise to close on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party after this Stage 1 debate on the budget. And throughout the budget process, I think a number of things have become clear, and I think those have been clarified this afternoon. Firstly, as we have heard already, the budget is only possible because the UK Labour Government delivered that record investment for Scotland, the largest block grant in the history of devolution, adding £5.2 billion to Scotland's budget. Now, we heard much commentary on that this afternoon, and there does seem to be something of a disagreement between the backbenches and the front benches here next to me, because we've heard a welcome of that money, a cautious welcome from the Scottish Government. We have heard the Finance Secretary say that she thinks it's a step in the right direction. And yet when we move to the backbenches, we have heard it tutted at this afternoon, we've heard it called charity or a handout, and we've also had no answers from the SNP backbenches about what decisions they would have taken in a UK budget in order to deliver that settlement for Scotland. Indeed, SNP MPs, we know, did not even come to vote for that budget. So I think it's very important to put that on the record as we begin our conclusions this evening. The second point I think is important to take from this process and from this debate is that the budget was always going to pass. And despite a huge effort on the part of the First Minister and government ministers to pretend otherwise, engaging at times in a level of amateur dramatics that would have rivalled a pantomime, and I'm glad Mr Cole-Hamilton got his wish perhaps for pantomime season to be extended, I think we've seen that repeated again in the chamber this afternoon. Indeed, I think patter about always the bridesmaid, never the bride is more at home in the pavilion than perhaps here in the chamber of the Scottish Parliament. So it was always clear that the Greens and the Liberal Democrats would sign up to help the government pass the budget. I think that was clear. So instead of that political intrigue that the First Minister and the government were so desperate for, to distract, I think, from the fundamental questions around how the government would reform, the public sector in Scotland, we have sought to focus, I think, on those very questions. And I'll take the Deputy First Minister at this point.
First Minister.
I was just going to say to the point the member makes, the fact that Labour were going to abstain and this government was still willing to engage with other parties and to secure changes for them, does that not demonstrate that this government is absolutely serious about building consensus and unity around delivering for Scotland, and why it reveals the Labour Party so far out of kilter with that objective?
Paul O'Kane.
The government spent months shadowboxing the Deputy Presiding Officer on these issues. We were threatened by the breakdown of public services. We were threatened by the rise of Elon Musk. We were threatened with all manner of issues. The reality is, this budget does not provide the new direction in our public services, where I think we can build a consensus in Scotland. This does not change the direction of this government or of this country. And it brings me to my very point. No, I want to make progress. It brings me to the point I was about to make about this budget. This is not year one of a new government. It is not the first budget that this government has delivered. No, it is the 18th budget under the SNP, and it is the 17th budget with John Swinney at the heart of that government. Indeed, there are members in this chamber who had just left school when the First Minister began to deliver budgets in Scotland. And instead of today taking the opportunity to transform public services through a budget, it is a correction from some of the worst mistakes that this government has made 18 years in the making with the SNP. It is a missed opportunity budget delivered by a tired government that has lost its way. And my colleagues this afternoon have outlined much of that, of where the problems are in our public services. Michael Mara, and I think the government would do well to listen to this because it is very serious and very stark. Yes, it is, First Minister, there are 1 in 6 Scots on an NHS waiting list under his watch. 100,000 Scots waiting more than a year for treatment. Fewer operations, people languishing in pain. Members, Deputy Presiding Officer, are laughing about the state of the NHS in Scotland. I think that is quite frankly appalling. It is clear That a botched National Care Service has not delivered. No, I won't. No, I'm not going to let the First Minister, who sat there and laughed at 1 in 6 Scots on the waiting list, justify his position. The reality is people are being. I'm not taking the intervention. A botched National Care Service, which had to be ditched because this government wouldn't listen, and people who have learning disabilities are being dramatically failed by this government. There is a permanent crisis in our NHS, and yet what has the answer been from this government? 5 plans for recovery for the NHS in less than 4 years. 5 plans, Presiding Officer, in my time in this Parliament. 3 First Ministers, 3 Health Secretaries, 5 plans and a serious lack of new direction and change for the NHS. But the First Minister tells us that everything is going to be all right because he is here. But I don't think that the RCN, the BMA, Unison, the trade unions, all those who have spoken with serious concern about the lack of ambition this government has for the NHS are convinced by that. So that is the lack of direction we have seen in this budget. Mark Griffin, my colleague, outlined the challenges in housing, replacing serious cuts to the housing budget, doing half of what it should do. Education, outlined by Pam Duncan-Glancy in some clarity and detail about the failure that exists with this government. And of course, we know that it is not just...
Mr O'Kane, if you could resume your seat. I've tolerated with a reasonable amount of sedentary commentary on the speech that's being delivered by Mr O'Kane. I'd be grateful if that could now cease. Mr O'Kane, continue, please.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer, because these are important, and it's important that the people of Scotland hear this debate. And we are concerned on this side of the chamber about this short-termism that comes from this government. Short-term decisions. The IFS have criticised the lack of direction in tax policy. The Public Finance and Public Administration Committee have repeatedly expressed concerns about delays to publishing key financial documents like a medium-term financial strategy. And Fraser of Allender have warned of risks stored up and the potential needed for further emergency measures, potentially next financial year, although I guess we should have expected that already, as it is something of an annual occurrence with this government. Presiding Officer, today is not a new day for this First Minister or this government. After 18 years, they have lost their way and they have lost ambition for the people of Scotland. It is clear that after 18 years of this leadership, one budget cannot change the course. It cannot provide a new direction for our public services. Indeed, it appears that this government does not recognise that that new direction is required at all. So the only way that we can change direction in Scotland is with a new government. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Commodore Fraser, up to 8 minutes. Mr Fraser.
Well, thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think it could probably be useful if I start by just reiterating why we on this side of the chamber are not voting for this budget. We're not voting for this budget because it puts the tax burden up. It does nothing to help the economy. It sees local services being cut. It sees council taxes going up. It sees university and colleges getting their budget squeezed, some even potentially facing bankruptcy. It sees rail fares going up. No action on cutting waste. No programme for public sector reform. And, of course, still spending money on the case for independence. That is why we are not backing this budget, Presiding Officer. So, let me look in more detail at some of the issues we've heard during this debate. So, we had, as usual, an interesting contribution from Michelle Thompson. I always enjoy Michelle Thompson's contributions, don't always agree with them, but she always makes an interesting contribution. I think we'll be sorry to miss her when she goes. And she talked about the social contract. Now, my colleague Liz Smith said that's all very well, but the social contract has to be paid for. It has to be properly funded, or it is of little value. So there's little point having free bus travel if there are no buses in the local area people can travel on. There's no point having free NHS dentistry if you cannot get an NHS dentist, because we know there are NHS dentists. Let me just make this point, I'll give way. If there are no NHS dentists available in your area. There's no point having free university education if you cannot get a place at a Scottish university due to the number of overseas students being brought in to try and balance the books. There's no point having free car parking at hospitals if you cannot get a parking space when you go to the hospital. And so the list goes on. I'll give way to Ross Greer.
I'm grateful to the member for taking the intervention. He's quite right to say that free bus travel is of very little use if there are no buses. But does he acknowledge that it is thanks to the expansion of free bus travel for young people that many bus services across the country have been saved from being cut completely? It's that massive increase in passenger numbers because of the delivery of concessionary travel that has protected and in many cases enhanced local bus services.
Murdo Fraser.
Well, I have to say to Mr Greer, I have to say his experience for his constituents might be very different from the experience many of my constituents face, particularly in rural parts of Fife and rural parts of Perth and Kinross, where what we've seen is a reduction in the bus services available rather than an increase. But we had some drama around this budget. We had some drama back in the autumn about the posturing by the Scottish Government suggesting that the budget might progress. I think we were always sceptical as to whether that drama would amount to very much, and our scepticism was justified because, of course, despite some posturing from the Greens early on suggesting they might, after being expelled from government, not support this budget, of course, they came to the table once again as the Nationalists' most reliable allies and agreed support in exchange for a few baubles being thrown their way. And it was the same for the Liberal Democrats, of whom perhaps we might have expected a little more. And as we heard from Craig Hoy earlier, Alex Cole-Hamilton has loudly maintained all the way through the budget discussions it was a red line for him that there would be no spending to promote independence. Now, the Lib Dems have done the deal, and embarrassingly for Mr Cole-Hamilton, as we've had confirmed in parliamentary answers, they will still be spending money on civil servants working to develop and communicate information on independence. So Mr Cole-Hamilton can apologise to the voters of West Edinburgh and elsewhere for selling out them when it comes to the Constitution.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful to Murdo Fraser for giving way. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, presiding officer. It really is pantomime season. Yes, there's a constitutional affairs issue, but that constitutional affairs department within the government is there to deal with the Internal Market Act, deal with dispute resolution, deal with legislative consent motions. But because of the Liberal Democrat negotiation, we have ended abruptly the continuance of white papers, and indeed there is no more Ministry for Independence. It is, presiding officer, pantomime season. I wonder, Mr Fraser, if you're asking, where's my career, it's behind you.
Murdo Fraser.
My goodness, presiding officer. All I would say gently to Mr Cole-Hamilton is I think he should read the parliamentary written answers obtained by my colleague Craig Hoy, set out exactly,
I'll send them to you.
Exactly where that spending on the Constitution Department goes, and you'll see it refers to independence. But it is the stance of Scottish Labour. And I don't know why Mr Swinney is sitting there heckling the sedentary position. Perhaps he needs to buy himself a pet cat and take it out for a walk and he'd feel a bit better, presiding officer. But it's the stance of Scottish... There he goes again, presiding officer.
First Minister, please restrain yourself.
Thank you, presiding officer. It's the stance of Scottish Labour that is perhaps the most confusing. So at least the Greens and at least the Liberal Democrats were able to negotiate some minor concessions in exchange for their budget support. But last month, Scottish Labour announced, regardless of the terms of the budget, they would be abstaining on the budget, giving John Swinney and his team a free pass. So the party that likes to present itself as the challenger to the SNP at the next Holyrood election has abandoned the field completely, scared off by the First Minister's over-dramatic warnings about the chaos and confusion should the budget be voted down. And I feel sorry for Michael Mara. I feel sorry for Michael Mara. He's been left exposed by his leader who's not even here today. He's left as exposed as Bianca Censori was at the Grammys the other night, presiding officer. But of course I'll give way to Mr Mara.
Michael Mara.
I appreciate the member giving way. Frankly, it was Scottish Labour that called time on the amateur dramatics of the threats of the far right, the collapse of industry and the doomsday future that the First Minister was predicting, because we put the £5.2 billion and we want to see that going to the front line, and that's why we've said we take the position that we will.
Well, I think Mr Mara sold himself rather cheaply, presiding officer. Perhaps he could have got some more concessions had he worked a little harder. So now we have the drama over. Just like the Grammys, the drama is over. Let's just look at exactly what's on offer from the largest financial settlement in the history of devolution, a budget that was supposed to be about growing the economy. And we have dismal growth projections, both for Scotland and now, of course, for the UK as a whole. We should have seen measures to support business expansion. And yet, according to research by Spice, on 3 key measures to support economic growth, on enterprise agencies, on Visit Scotland and on employability, all have been cut in real terms compared to the last financial year of 2020 through to 24 of course I'll give way.
Very briefly, Cabinet Secretary.
I just wonder if Murdo Fraser thinks the Tory proposals to cut our trade offices across the world would help or hinder economic growth in Scotland.
Murdo Fraser.
What we don't want to see are these offices being used by Mr Robertson to promote the cause of independence around the globe, which is what they've been doing. And we have an excellent network of trade offices run by UKTI. We should be utilising these, presiding officer. And then, of course, the SNP took the decision not to pass on the Barnett consequentials for the 40% rates relief for retail, hospitality and leisure available south of the border, as Pam Gozo reminded us, meaning hospitality here. So it's a much less generous package than that available elsewhere in the United Kingdom. And when it comes to personal taxation, there's been no greater divergence with tax rates payable elsewhere in the UK, but it bakes in higher taxes payable by nearly half the workers in Scotland. And when the Finance Secretary says, well, some workers are better off, they're better off to the tune of £1.21 a month, not even the cost of a first-class stamp, presiding officer. So, in conclusion, presiding officer, while Liberals and Greens will support this budget and Labour sit on their hands, it is left to the Scottish Conservatives to provide the only opposition. And we are very clear, we won't be supporting a budget which, despite a record uplift in the Westminster Block Grant, will do nothing to help grow the economy, will deliver cuts in local services and higher council tax bills, and continues to see spending to promote the cause of independence. We may be the only ones here voting no to the SNP's budget, but in so doing, we will be representing the interests of the Scottish people.
Thank you very much. I now call on Ivan McKee to wind up the debate. Minister, up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, this is not just another budget. It's a clear statement of this government's priorities and our values as a government and as a parliament. It is indeed a budget by Scotland and for Scotland. And at its heart, this budget is a plan for Scotland's future. It addresses the immediate needs of our society while investing in the long-term priorities that will shape the future of our nation. This is a budget that includes measures to support businesses with a challenging trading environment, a real terms increase in local government funding to better support local services, record investment to reform and improve the National Health Service, a significant boost to housing investment and capital projects that will stimulate growth, further steps to eradicate child poverty and create the best foundations for our next generation, investment in the clean, green opportunities of a just transition. This budget also protects the social contract at the heart of this government's approach, continuing free prescriptions, ensuring that no Scottish student pays tuition fees, provide access to free bus travel for almost 2.3 million people. Presiding Officer, throughout this budget, we've engaged closely with members from all parties to ensure that the budget reflects the diverse needs of our communities. And this collaborative approach has allowed us to build a budget that delivers real value for the people of Scotland. Presiding Officer, I want to touch on some of the contributions that have been made this afternoon. A wide range of contributions, from the thoughtful to the comical and everything in between. And I want to start off with Alex Cole-Hamilton, who, along with Ross Greer, have both listed out quite a long list, both in their opening speeches and indeed in their closing speech, comments from Ross Greer of the gains that they made by taking part in this budget process. I think that stands in stark contrast to many other parties across this chamber that I want to talk a bit more on later in my remarks. I was taken by Ross Greer's comments on the consensus that is a hugely important part of this Parliament and the fact that different parties work together to deliver that. I was interested to hear him misquote Marx and Engels talking about the spectre that is or isn't haunting Scotland, but that's another discussion for another day. I thought Emma Roddick made a very thoughtful contribution, her analysis of why Labour had abstained, something that's been perplexing us for a number of weeks now, and she put it down to their complex relationship and their inability to break free from the behaviour and policies of the UK Labour government. She identified them as Scottish Labour as being both aimless and pointless. So it was interesting in that context to hear
Michael Mara's contribution, with his call for change, his call for a new approach, his call for a new direction. Indeed, us on these benches were happily filling in and ticking off on our bingo cards as the various buzzwords came out of the Labour benches. I think every single speech had new direction, and the vast majority also had change and new approach. But what kind of change? Is it the short change we've seen from the UK Labour government round about their behaviour on the winter fuel payment, on the two-child cap, on the WASPy women? Is that what we're talking about when it comes to, or is this the loose change of Scottish Labour rattling about, not quite sure of their direction or indeed their purpose? The Labour front bench talked about the need for,
Michael Mara. I appreciate the Minister giving way. It's the kind of change that we actually need, not a plan to make sure that we get 1 in 6 Scots off a waiting list. We actually re-operationalise our NHS and put it back to fit purpose to actually help the people of Scotland, rather than the continued decline that we're seeing under this government.
Minister. Frankly, again, more sound bites, but no substance to that at all. Just change. They talk about the need for reform, but unfortunately other Labour members didn't get that memo. Pam Duncan-Glancy railing against any calls for restructuring of services or any calls for recruitment freezes, really talking against the Labour front bench's call for a public service reform agenda. Mark Griffin, on the other hand, got with a list of things that he would like to have seen in the budget. And all I can say is it's a real shame that Mark Griffin wasn't indeed the lead negotiator for the Labour Party in these negotiations. Or they might have actually come away with something as a consequence, rather than the nothing they delivered from their discussion with the government. I think Labour's too focused on what they call the non-Dom community, and too focused on looking for good ideas from Nigel Farage's agenda to be able to take seriously the negotiation and deliver on what that this government is taking forward. I was slightly perplexed when first listening to Kevin Stewart's contribution. I was wondering who these 4 bears were, why there were 4 of them, why they were all waving different coloured flags, until I realised he was saying 4 bears rather than 4 bears. And he was talking about the Labour Party moving from a red flag to a white flag, so it was a very apt contribution on reflection. Turning to Kenny Gibson's contribution on behalf of the committee, he talked at length about the need for the public service reform agenda, and you can rest assured it's an agenda that this government takes very seriously. We are moving forward with a summit of public body leaders in the middle of February. Following on from that, we will be publishing a strategy which will be agreed with that body of public service leaders as we work on the issues that need to be delivered in order for a real reform agenda to take place, making sure we get real value from the spend that this government puts on public services, focused on prevention upstream, and making sure there's real collaboration and integration across those services. I'm very much looking forward to taking that work forward, and very much looking forward to FPAC and others contributing to that agenda. Turning to the contribution from the Conservative members, backbencher after backbencher after backbencher standing up and asking for more funding, while the front bench resolutely calling for tax reductions. Same old, absolutely right. Alexander Stewart talking for more funding for local government, despite the fact that there's been a £1 billion increase in local government funding. I don't think, and the Cabinet Secretary reminded me earlier in the debate, I don't think we heard Craig Hoy ask once for more local government funding during the negotiation process. So again, some kind of strange disconnect between the front bench and the back bench on the Tory party. Maybe it's that dividing line that sits between them that Craig Hoy was talking about, a dividing line that Ross Greer spoke about when he said the difference is between those who are focused on delivery and those who see this process as some kind of performative stage show, pantomime perhaps, in order to try and grab some cheap headlines without actually focusing on delivering for the people that they are supposed to represent. Perhaps it's the dividing line between those that can add up a budget, a government that balances its budget for every one of 17, now 18 years, and a Tory party that clearly can't add up because they talk about tax cuts at the same time as talking for more spending, and think that the magic word growth
gets them out of any problem in that regard. I'll give way to Craig Hoy, and I hope he's not just going to say growth and sit down again.
Craig Hoy. I thank the Minister for giving way. In December, the Scottish Benefits Bill was running at £5.3 billion a year. By the end of this decade, it's going to be £8.8 billion a year. How is he going to make those sums add up? Minister.
Well, let's be clear, this government has balanced its budget every year. We work through the detail of what's in front of us in any given year. We figure out how we're going to balance the revenue with the expenditure we have to make. We make our commitment as government to govern as to choose and to make those priorities. We do it every year. We're committed to that spend. We've balanced our budget last year, we'll balance it this year, we'll balance it next year, and we'll continue to do so. That's the reality. And he can point at pieces of paper all he likes, but the reality is this government is focused on balancing our budget while delivering the priorities for the people of Scotland, and that's something we will continue to do. And we'll continue to take forward more detailed work on that, and the Cabinet Secretary will be bringing forward a fiscal sustainability delivery plan, our medium-term financial strategy in the next few weeks and months, which will give more detail around how we are working to take that agenda forward. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I want to reiterate that this budget is about making Scotland a better place for all of its people. It's about eradicating child poverty, building a strong, sustainable economy, tackling the climate emergency and protecting high-quality public services. This is a budget that delivers on this government's promises, one that looks forward with hope, one that demonstrates the strength of our collective will as a parliament to build a better future for Scotland. I'm proud of what this budget represents, and I'm confident that, with the support of this parliament, we will make a real and lasting difference for the people of Scotland. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on Budget Scotland No. 4 bill at stage 1. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, and there's one question to be put as a result of today's business. The question is that motion 16299 in the name of Shona Robertson on Budget Scotland No. 4 bill at stage 1 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access digital voting.